So mean, Super Don.
What? I'm not mean.
Are you? Come on, you tell me you're more coordinated than this?
I think I am. I mean, I'll admit I haven't done a jumping jack in a while, but
we're on the air. Oh my gosh, they just heard us talking about that. Hold on, Robert Scott Bell Show is just about to begin. Stand by. Here we go.
You are listening to The Robert Scott Bell Show.
These days, it's more important than ever to know where our food and supplements come from. That's why, at Plus CBD Oil, we believe it is critical to manage every step of the supply chain process. It all starts with certified hemp seeds. Our hemp grows tall, like bamboo, and is harvested within 3 months. After harvest, the hemp is dried and sent to our CO2 extraction facility, where our raw formula is extracted. The extracted oil is then lawfully imported to our state-of-the-art in-house laboratory in San Diego, California. There, we convert our raw formula into our total plant complex and gold formula oils. Our oils are then used to formulate our award-winning Plus CBD oil product line. The products are then tested for cannabinoid content and the absence of harmful substances. But we go one step further. We then send our products to a third-party laboratory to verify concentration, quality, and safety. After that, the products have finished their journey and are ready to be shipped to your local health food store. Because at Plus CBD Oil, we believe how you do anything is how you do everything. That's why, from seed to shelf, we are committed to providing safe and effective hemp CBD products for you and your loved ones. It's our promise to you. Learn more about our commitment to full traceability at pluscbdoil.com.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
I listen to get accurate, up-to-date information.
I've learned so much from him.
It is awesome. It's the best entertainment that I've found.
You rock the health world. Keep it up. I love you.
Now, the voice of health, freedom, and liberty, here's Robert Scott Bell.
right, who's ready to rock the health world with me? RSB and Super D be joining us in just a second here. I just got in from the garden. I did indeed plant some marigolds this morning to bring on the pollinators, because we got the tomatoes coming up. We got all kinds of stuff, all kinds of goodness going, and I wanted to get out there in the sunshine. So sorry for our friends in the northern hemisphere. Wait, no, shall I say that again? Reverse it. Southern hemisphere, where they're just about entering winter. We're just about to enter summer up north. So welcome one and all. The place for health, freedom, and healing liberty is on. And guess what? Brian Hooker, PhD, Professor Dr. Brian Hooker is going to join us hour 2 to discuss his latest peer-reviewed medical article on the results of vaccinated children prior to 1 year and non-vaccinated health outcomes. Oh my gosh, they're going to be conniption fits. They're going to be skeptic heads exploding. And those are okay. Those are okay. But we got a lot to do before that. Now, I want to check in on my brother, my buddy, my humble, lovable producer, Super Don, as we open today. You know, I just feel like with all the stuff that people are watching, and I hope they're not watching it as intently as you are, because you have to monitor the feeds, but seeing what's going on out there in the inner cities, the battles that are going on, the agents provocateur, the bricks appearing mysteriously out of nowhere, you know, I want to find things that we can laugh about too, because it's just, I don't want it to all be about, oh man, another crazy day, right? There's good stuff too happening. I'm not muting you out, buddy, but you are mute.
How's that?
Now you're not deaf,
That's
but you're
better.
mute. Now you're
All right.
better. All right.
Okay. All right.
Super D, welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, there's craziness going on out there, and it's still going on. I think like it's not as bad as it was for the first couple of nights. But you're right. I mean, it's kind of hard to be on Facebook or Twitter right now, just because there's so much. It's just, you know, if it wasn't bad enough that we had people fighting over whether you should be quarantined or not, or whether you should wear a mask or not, and now it's the race thing.
I know.
You know?
And it was, you know, okay, you throw slings at me, that's fine. Like, hey, how dare you have your meeting and you didn't wear a mask? Nobody was wearing a mask last week in Charlotte. I'm like, okay, but where's your equal outrage to the people roaming the streets, doing physical violence on others, and you don't mention COVID-19 once? Suddenly it's like, well, no, those people aren't contagious because they agree with me politically. I mean, again, this is coming down to the political divide again. Where are people going to entrench in their corners or their sides? And I don't particularly like that. I know the dog's excited, but we'll have to deal with it.
I'm going to go shut the door. Hold on.
You're going to shut the door? Shut the front door. All right, we're going to go back to, honestly, we're going to get to some stories here. I just, you know, today I was like, you know what? I don't want to do any stories. I just want to talk to Super Don.
It's one of those, you know, it's the working from home thing, right? You know, like the double-edged sword here.
Yeah.
So anyway, so to what you were saying, you got the, you know, the violence, you've got the looting and, you know, burning buildings down and lighting cars on fire and stuff. Yeah. That's really bad. But there's something I want to share with you. Something that made me laugh this morning.
Well, is those people jumping jack? Oh, wait, what is this?
There's a guy throwing a brick.
Oh!
No,
we got to see that again. I'm going full screen now. This is the part of the news that we didn't get covered. The looters or the brick throwers don't know where they got their brick.
This is a camera that caught these guys that were going here, and you got the first guy up here, and he throws the brick, and the other guy's okay. I'm gonna throw my brick. Oh
no! No, he's out cold. That dude went down like a ton of bricks.
That is brutal. It was like the guy. Let's watch this one more time. Watch this. And the guy throws the brick.
First brick, close
and then
range.
He starts and he walks right into
across. Oh! This guy would not do well on a gun range either. You do not walk in front of the guns. Yeah. Neither one of them were practicing any form of safe brick throwing.
And that's one of those things that gets funnier each time you see it, because it just keeps looping over and over again. So I guess you could call that instant karma, right?
Yeah, that was pretty fast. Destroy public property and a brick hits you. That's the quickening. Now, who did that song Brick House? Remember that one?
Ooh.
Oh, she's a brick.
Yeah, I totally remember that. Who was that?
My dad.
Man, that's reaching back. All right, somebody in the chat room will get that real quick.
Somebody will pick up on Brick House and let me know.
And I'm going to kick myself when I see the answer, because I should know this. Mm-hmm. That was my time.
A little bit of brick throwing.
The Commodores did that?
Did the Commodores do that? It could be. Yeah, she's up.
Oh, it was the Commodores. Okay.
Yeah, Lionel Richie was jamming back then too. Even
was he still in it then,
or did he leave them before then?
I don't think he was in it when that came out.
Oh well. Listen, I'm having a good time already. Not covering the news. Show me that brick thrower thing again.
Yeah, you want to see that again?
Yeah.
Somebody's saying this is an old video, so I wasn't claiming that this was.
It was new to me.
That this happened recently, but it's very timely with what it is that we're seeing and stuff like that. So
my wife says it was Earth, Wind, and Fire and not the Commodores doing.
No, it wasn't Earth, Wind, and Fire.
No,
I know that much. Yeah.
All right.
So there's the first
here's
guy.
the first guy throwing it, and then second guy, boom, down. You're not gonna beat that brick to the face.
Oh, and there's another one out there. I don't know where it's at, but it's a similar thing where they caught these guys on camera. And the guy goes to throw the brick, and it was one of those plexiglass windows.
Yes, and it bounces off.
Here,
right?
Boink.
Boom.
Yeah,
wow.
And it bounces off and hits the guy back in the head. I remember that one. So anyway,
well, I mean, man. All right, we don't have to cover more riot news, do we? I don't think so. I'd rather not.
Riot news?
Yeah.
No, but let's go back to that thing everybody seems to have forgotten about called coronavirus.
Okay, all right. Let's go to the notes here. Let's see what's happening. We are open. COVID-19 vaccines, Novavax poll, pandemic antibiotics, social distancing confusion, reopening America, Metformin recall. Brian Hooker, we should just skip to that right now, but he's not ready until next hour, so we're going to roll with that. So COVID-19 in kids, a reason to be wary of COVID-19 vaccines. So this is in Forbes magazine, dude.
It seems like this could be a headline that you would see on Natural News. You would see maybe on Vaxxed, Age of Autism, maybe something like that. But this is Forbes.
Yeah, this is amazing. This William Hazeltine, he says more than a dozen COVID-19 vaccines are in development, many of them being tested in humans and many more to begin human trials soon. But what do we know about these potential vaccines and why might we be wary of them? He's asking very reasonable questions. Anybody should be asking that. And he says wary, of course, does not mean to stop testing them, but it does mean that we should be careful, fully understand what they do, what they don't do, what harm they might cause to otherwise healthy adults and children. Okay. There's nothing unreasonable about that. I might dispute and say maybe we don't need to test them at all because we don't need them. Okay. But just barring that, if you're going to do it, yeah, test them. But I feel bad for the people that are going to be tested on. Some of the reports were as high as 20% very serious adverse reactions. So he says we don't know that they're safe. No human trial safety data is there. It's not. Companies have issued press releases claiming safety without releasing the data. You just got to trust them. Once again, the cognitive dissonance on the political left here. I'm sorry, you guys on the political left, please use your critical thinking skills. You don't trust big pharma for their drugs, their costs, all that. And on a vaccine issue, suddenly they get religion and you get the inconsistencies annoy me. I'm just going to be honest about that. It's just, they do. Cognitive dissonance is annoying. We don't know if they will protect anyone from infection, he says. In some cases, they raised antibodies in experimental animals, but it's not clear whether those animals are protected. Again, the controversy now admitted via the official immunology team and vaccine team and government medical team, we're not sure if antibodies to COVID-19 are protective. Well, what does that mean for the rest of the antibodies out there? Or are these the unusual ones, the first ones in history that now we acknowledge may not be protective? So what is the purpose of an antibody? If it is to engage and disable something that is considered to be a threat, you'd think having them was a no-brainer. That's a good thing, right? And, I've never protested antibodies. Talk about protests. Never protested antibodies. But I have acknowledged, because I've read the immunological journals, and they do acknowledge that you can still get whatever the named infection is, even if you have antibodies. And you can possibly not get it, even if you don't have antibodies. So the entire holy grail, the search for the antibody, becomes dissolved in primordial scientific goo that they refuse to look at, yet in this Forbes article opinion piece, they actually sort of acknowledge. Data from the studies, very limited number of non-human primates available for one type of vaccine, an adenovirus vector that carries the spike protein gene of SARS-CoV-2. Vaccination failed to protect any of the monkeys from infection of the nasal, but did lower the amount of virus-associated damage to the lung. But then again, what are we finding out? Very interesting. What did we cover yet? It's a blood issue. It's an oxygen carrying issue. It may not be a lung issue at all, after all, unless you keep buying into, we think it's this. It's this. Wait, it's not that. We think it's this. It's this. Wait, no, it's not that. We think it's this. It's this. Wait, you know what? It's all of the above. Every one of the things we just said, it's everything. So this virus basically is the first virus that causes everything in everybody. No matter what they have, we'll find a way to massage it into reality that this is the magic virus that just does everything. Blue hands, blue feet, loss of sense of smell, loss of sense of taste. It's a lung issue. It's a skin issue. It's not a skin. It's a lung. It's a blood issue. It's an oxygen. It's this. No discussion of mineral deficiencies or imbalances as we talk about copper. You don't have it. You got iron. You got iron problems. Iron in the fire, right? Iron in your fire. Without copper, it's dangerous. No selenium. Your cells aren't protected. They're going to dysregulate. Why? Because you're toxic. You can't detoxify efficiently. Every cell in your body depends on selenium for that and many other functions. Liver as well. None of that is discussed. Again, acknowledge the Forbes article. Again, I'm trying to give props to it overall because it's saying, maybe we should be a little suspicious, a little concerned, a little reticent to just take it on faith, right? The failure to protect animals from a nasal infection raises the possibility that vaccines will offer only partial protection. That is, they may reduce lung disease, but not infection by the nasal mucosa, the primary route that they're saying. And so this guy's already behind the times because he's continually focusing on lung health, lung, when we now have gone past it. Of course, we go past it by also saying, well, it is the same thing anyway. Yeah, forget what I just said about it being a lung thing. No, remember that it's a lung thing. No, forget that remember. The state of confusion is so complete that if you are a non-critical thinking leftist, you just give up and you go, well, I know that they're a little contradictory, but they're still the guys wearing the badges. They got the white lab coats and I worship them. They're like the priests in the church that I used to go to, but now I worship at the Church of Pharmaceutical Mysticism. And if they say it's good, it's good. I don't need the testing. And you're going to find out with an article here coming up that my statements are not an exaggeration. 27% unlikely to be vaccinated against coronavirus. Guess who's leading the charge in not vaccinating from this potential vaccine for COVID? Republicans and conservatives and evangelical Christians. As if that's a bad thing. That tells you that they're actually smarter than the average, I guess, leftists. Oh, man, am I going to get in trouble now from the people that say, see, you're going political again. Listen, I'm reporting the news here. This is coming from some kind of poll that kind of assessed, like, who's going to be rah vaccine, who's going to be no way. And so as I report this from a mainstream news article, if that matters to you, ABC News, what are we left with? What conclusions are we left with? I know their conclusions will differ from mine. That's just to be expected. But the number one reason cited for those who are not willing to get the vaccine is a distrust of vaccines. That seems to be a healthy way to go through life because that means you distrust the pharmaceutical industrial complex. Yeah, you distrust big pharma. How is that a bad thing? Come on, folks that are all in on the vaccines. How come you have such cognitive dissonance that you can't see your distrust of big pharma in general somehow gets lost or evaporated, disappears when the word vaccine is mentioned? Latin vaca, cow. Are you secretly a moo cow? Is that what it is? You can't think because you're a cow? We got cows out back. I don't know if they're getting vaccinated. They're eating grass. They're chewing their cud. They're not bothering anybody. So why you, moo cow liberals, want us to be forced to have vaccines that haven't been tested? or that once come to market, you say they should be mandated. Now, if you happen to self-describe as a liberal and you don't believe what I'm saying, then I'm not talking about you or to you at this point. Recognize what I'm pointing out is there are factions within liberals, conservatives. Because look, there's a percentage of conservatives, Republicans, and even evangelical Christians that would get the vaccine. I say the same thing about them. They're not the smartest among their groups. 45% of strong conservatives, 4 in 10 Republicans, and nearly as many evangelical Christians say they'll be unlikely to get the vaccine against coronavirus, even if it's free. If it's free, then I'll get it. Right? If you suspect that it might be dangerous to your health, are you going to go, oh, well, that burger with salmonella? Well, since it's free, yeah, give me 10. Right. No, that's not how it works. It's like, can't we persuade you to take this vaccine? Can't we persuade you to eat this contaminated burger if we give it to you for free? Who falls for that? And what does that tell you about their critical thinking skills? 27% of adults in the ABC News Washington Post poll say they definitely, 15% or probably 12% would not get the vaccine. That's where they get the 27% number. Among them, half said they don't trust vaccines in general, while nearly a quarter don't think it's needed in this case. And that alone, whether you trust vaccines or not, that last statement, you don't think it's needed, that is rational. That, I would argue, is a very well thought out critical result, if you will, of going through and observing what we've been going through for the first maybe 6 months of 2020. Super D, let me put on your critical thinking hat because it works really well. If you look at what's happened, what's transpired, all that we've been through, all that we've been reporting on, and you come to the conclusion now, June of 2020, for those watching live and listening live, are you one to think that, let's just pretend you and I both were all into vaccines. Like we're not into any controversies. We don't even think about it. We go, would we assess based on what has happened, do we need a vaccine for COVID-19?
No. Unless you're buying into the just wait 3 months from now, it's going to come back and be worse.
You're right. And also, if I was to say we believe fully in the vaccine stuff, right, we probably would say, yeah, we need a vaccine because we don't think critically. I'm just sorry. That's just where I conclude at this point. Yeah. Because my point or my attempt at a point is just saying that if we look at the 6 months that have transpired thus far, we say who's really died that they claim have died from it. We argue that no one's died of it, but died with it, if that's the case. But no, we'd say that, okay, old people on death's door, in nursing homes, in hospice, people who are on multiple medications, multiple comorbidities, what are the risk factors, basic chronic dysfunction of the immune system, et cetera, et cetera. Why would we need to vaccinate otherwise healthy people that do not suffer from COVID-19? As we say, most people are asymptomatic. Kids are not getting it, much less if they're getting it. There's no symptoms. They're not dying. How do we conclude that we can't move about the world again without a COVID-19 passport? Where's that logic? Is there any logic in there at all?
No, not really. Not in my opinion.
No.
But again, it just depends on who you're.
Bring up the brick thrower and receiver, because then maybe they understand something we don't.
Okay. Here we go.
All right. So if we were to ask this guy who's still awake at the moment, what do you think about vaccines?
Oh,
boom. Yeah. We pretty much agree, I think, at
Good
this
night.
point. Yeah. Good night, Josephine. That's it. That's all she wrote. So, I do like the article overall. I'm like, the guy's asking some good questions. In Forbes, of all places, it's amazing that it got published, and then we have the secondary questionnaire, if you will, that resulted in, hey, man, looks like a lot of people, significant, more so than the 2 or 3% that were not getting vaccinated at all, which is the freak out from the mainstream agenda. The reason why the WHO said vaccine hesitancy, top 10 list of dangers to the world. And of course, now Trump goes, we're not participating in WHO. Dude, that, whatever you think of Trump on other things, that guy rocked it doing that. That's amazing. So if we look at, let's see the mix of groups, let's go through this a little bit here. expressing less interest in getting vaccinated. 46% of Republican women, 45% of very conservative Americans, 40% Republicans, and 37% of evangelical Christians. So that means 63% of evangelicals are willing to get it. I think they're not reading their Bible well enough. Just my opinion. Y'all can disagree with me, but if you're willing to take what's going to be in that, and it may be an mRNA kind of scenario to alter your very genetic structure or code, I think you missed some chapters of the Bible you need to go back and read. Across the spectrum, here's where we go. I'm sorry, my Democrat friends, if you claim to be party to that party, 90% of Democratic men said they definitely or probably would get the vaccine, as would 81% of Democrats overall, and as many liberals in this poll produced for ABC. All right, Super D, this is where we get into trouble, because 9 out of 10 Democratic men are morons on this issue. 8 out of 10 Democrats overall, morons on this issue. Not thinking critically at all. As we can see, the violence perpetuated, where is it happening? Largely in cities dominated by Democrat mayors, states, Democrat governors, Democratic legislators. And that's not me hating on Democrats. It's me making an observation that you can't refute. Does it mean that there are no Republicans that are dummies like this? No, it doesn't. They're morons too. But on this particular issue, I'm asking for you to think a little bit deeper than superficially, a little bit deeper than what your church leaders, in this case, the Church of Pharmaceutical Mysticism, vaccinologists, are putting in your brain. Oh my gosh, you can't move about, you can't leave your house without a COVID-19 passport one day, and certainly not without a mask and gloves, and on and on and on it goes. So I'm not impressed with the, let's say, Democratic thinking overall in this regard. Now, it's probably not a surprise to a lot in our audience, but at the same time, it must be pointed out. And this survey has been done by a number of different survey companies, including Fox News, ABC, Pew, and CNN. It's not a lot different. So it seems to be hitting across the board here. So where do we go next? How about pandemic antibiotics? There have been arguments that during this time that people were saying put them on a Z-Pack. I don't know, what were the antibiotics that they were saying?
Was it
Zithromax, right? Yeah. Zithromax, right. So they'd say, here, give them one of these drugs and a Zithromax. And yet, ignorance of the negative or the untoward outcome of relying on antibiotics for anything, particularly that when this was not a bacterial infection, they claim it was viral. Antibiotics don't work that way, but they can suppress immune response. So if you would argue that this was a hyperimmune response, a cytokine storm, could you argue that taking an antibiotic could reduce that? Perhaps. Because you destroy the immune response by destroying the immune system. What do antibiotics do? 70% of your immune system's in your gut. It's like napalming that immune system. So what happens later? What have we done? By doing this with people with no bacterial infections, we have set the stage for what? More resistant bugs. Increased antibiotic use in combating COVID-19 will strengthen bacterial resistance and ultimately lead to more, guess what? Deaths. During this crisis and beyond, according to guess who? The World Health Organization. Good Lord. They're now knowing or acknowledging that modern medicine is going to be the death of us all if we acquiesce to their drugs, to their interventions, to their treatments, even if it's not appropriate, which I argue in most cases outside of emergency trauma interventions, it is largely inappropriate. So destroying the immune system by destroying the gut through antibiotics due to what? Response to a viral pandemic that they claim? Once again, who's wearing the dunce caps? The homeopaths? Not so much. The naturopaths? Not so much. The herbalists? Not so much. The chiropractors? Not so much. The allopaths? Just keep the dunce cap on and park really close to the building. You know those handicap spots? They're for you. Mental handicaps. Because you're not seeing clearly your own training. You're not looking at what you've learned. Did you learn much about the immune system? Why do you give antibacterial drugs to people who are supposedly suffering with viral manifestations? Whether we disagree with that viral issue or not, if I give you that, why an antibiotic? Unless you're trying to suppress and destroy the immune system and create more superbugs, as you call them. Thankfully, those superbugs are still vulnerable to other things, botanical things, metallic things like a mineral known as silver, which is a broad spectrum antimicrobial that has antibacterial activity, certainly. Even resistant strains to antibiotics are still vulnerable to the active state of silver. So I'm not worried in a big scheme of things. It's just a worry for the people who don't know this. And they continue to go to doctors and they continue to be hammered by various forms of chemo, wrongly called antibiotics, even though they sure are anti-life. But they should also be called chemo, so you would think clearly before you go, doc, I'll take another round of chemo for an infection. Really? Is that what you want? You go, whoa, chemo for an infection? Yeah, that doesn't sound right, Robert. No, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right for cancer, but at least you kind of get hopefully the analogy. Hopefully you can get to it, see it. Let's see what else we got here. I want to take a break. I want to come back and let's talk about spacing issues, social distancing issues, the crime that is against humanity to social distance. And there are people, once again, unfortunately, largely on the political left, that believe social distancing is necessary for how long? I don't know. Masks forever? I don't know. Immunity passport? I mean, please, hug a liberal. Maybe you can hug some common sense into them on this issue. I want to love them. I want to love them back to some semblance of immunological reality so that we aren't destroyed as a species because we are now fearing that all humans are vectors of disease. The simple act of breathing is a criminal act, and we must stay at home and never come out until we are given the thumbs up from lizard people like Bill Gates or emperors like Anthony Fauci and Birx and all of those CDC, WHO conflicts of interest combined with the pharmaceutical agenda to reduce world population. That's not what I want. I want to see more silly bricks being thrown and knocking out the looters. I don't know if the guy recovered, but he was knocked cold from that experience. So thank you, Super Don, for that. When we come back from this break, we'll talk about the social distancing. We'll talk about a state-by-state guide, the update to the reopening of America, and how the hashtag #WeOpenedAmerica did indeed happen. It cannot be erased from history as long as you keep recognizing it, sharing it, communicating it, telling your stories, and live in the reality that is the love and divinity that you are. Just trying to remind you, that's all. So, thanks again to our friends at Trinity School of Natural Health. Back after this.
For thousands of years, the iris has been examined to determine potential deficiencies and health issues in the body. Every human optic nerve contains between 800,000 to 1.7 million nerve fiber endings. These nerves connect our eyes to the brain and continue down our spinal cord, connecting to every organ and gland in our body. This course utilizes the iridology chart developed by Bernard and Ellen Jensen, which tells us what markings in the iris may be pointing to issues in certain organs or glands. In this course, you will learn how to identify the genetic strengths and weaknesses with organs, glands, and tissues, tendencies towards tissue irritation and inflammation, how to find the potential ability of an organ's reaction to the presence of illness, discernment of familial patterns of illness, including digestive issues, blood sugar tendencies, blood anomalies, and heart issues, and how to locate potential nervous system imbalances, spinal subluxations, circulatory disturbances, connective tissue weakness, and much, much more. Iridology is a fascinating art and science. Learning it will change the way you look at the human eye. If you're interested in learning iridology or have questions whether it's right for you or not, please send us an email or call and get started on your journey to transform the world.
Getting some interesting comments here as we're coming back live on the air. Thank you for being here. Super Don, did you see this one? Be Wise, Be Strong says, RSB, a doctor told me once he prescribed antibiotics for a viral infection because sometimes the virus is carried by the bacteria. What is it, like a little game of piggyback?
Is that for real? Maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
Virus on a bacteria. Look,
I've never heard that before.
Still not a good excuse.
And bacteria.
So what happens if you kill the bacteria that the virus is carrying? You still have no impact on the virus. The virus is going to find another vector of moving about if you believe the virus is even the cause of the problem, which we do dispute here.
Bacteriophage.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think whoever that doctor was a dunderhead, as usual. David Martin pointed out that during the Spanish flu pandemic, the U.S. Army did a study on distancing. It was found to cause a worse outcome. David Martin would be a good guess. Who's David Martin? We could get him on. Sure. Happy to bring on some new guests on the subject. Absolutely. So yesterday, we did the J.B. Handley story on social distancing with Dr. Ravi,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Dr.
Yes.
Ravi was awesome. Love Dr. Ravi. And so here it is. I'm going to bring it up for you because it's all scientific. It's all science. 6 feet of social distancing best, but even 3 feet should help, according to a new study. You might can get a little closer now? Yeah.
I love that. I love that headline because it wasn't that long ago they were saying that they were wrong about 6 feet.
Yeah. It had to
That
be
it's
18,
actually
12,
18 feet
21
or something,
feet.
right? Yeah. Now, but then, but actually 3 feet might be okay too.
3 feet would be
And this
okay.
is the reason why people get so frustrated. Is because there's this constant barrage of all this conflicting information coming from the CDC is arguing with the WHO. The WHO is arguing with Andrew Cuomo, and Andrew Cuomo is arguing with Donald Trump. But yeah, I mean, it's just like everybody's got something different to say. It's like most people are just like, screw you, shut up, leave me alone.
Well, as well they should be saying that and believing that and living that. 6 feet is best. Really based on what? Yesterday we found out it was really based on any sound science. But 3 feet should help. Help what? Help you to identify individuals in large groups via 5G mapping? Is that it? Your technology has advanced to the point where, 3 feet's okay. We're going to tell you it's still safe, it's still okay, but it's really for us to map where you are, who you are, whenever you are. A new review of 172 studies from 16 countries concluded that keeping people 3 feet apart might also help you. What if your arms are 3 feet long? Does that count? Or do you have to now double that, right? Is it arm length? Is the arms going to be the spread? What part of you is a spreader? And as I mentioned, fluttering your eyelids. Should the virus be anywhere in your presence, you're going to send it a flutter through the butterfly effect to impact people around the world. So why not just distance by putting one person on their own planet? I mean, isn't that the next logical place to go with this, Super Don? We keep up with this idea of distancing is the only way to protect one another. Why not just have one person per planet? There's a zillion planets out there. We can find enough to cover 7.5 billion people. Everybody gets their own planet.
There's no way we can get to them. So
what?
We
what?
Can. There's space travel. It's
no. Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Put a Tesla Roadster up there. We can get anywhere.
Go to the International Space Station, maybe.
Warp speed ahead.
Yeah.
No, think about that. Just one person on the planet. That's all you need because it's... Wait. What about animals? Oh, wait. What about plants? What about microbes in the soil? What about things that are airborne coming like space dust? Dude, again, the germ theory it's messed up. It's got people's minds warped. That's what's warped. Believing that the mere presence of or contact with what they call a pathogen, a bacteria, a virus, a fungus, will result in disease and death is wrong. From the beginning, Pasteur was a thief, a criminal, a liar. He wasn't even that smart in the big scheme of things. He stole from people like Antoine Béchamp and Claude Bernard, who actually knew the law of the terrain. The terrain, the milieu, the environment, that determines what grows there. Your health begets your health. And if you're healthy, your impact on others could be powerfully positive, not negative. Yet you want to sequester the people who are healthy and keep them from one another, lock them down in a room so that they become less healthy. That's the whole point of collectivism. Making everybody equally poor so that they're equally dependent upon a ruling elite, which is a big part of this rioting scam, where people in their own neighborhoods are going, hey, what are you doing here? Don't be spray painting. That's not us. They're going to say it's us. Why would we destroy our businesses in our own communities? That's stupid. And I think most people in their own communities know that, and that most of these things perhaps are agents provocateurs coming from outside of the community to set it ablaze for the purpose of weakening that community so that they become vulnerable and hungry and homeless, and then through collectivism socialism and communism, become equally decrepit in the eyes of their overlords that can then be saved by, hey, just sign up with this little thing, accept the implanted chip, accept the vaccines, and we'll give you all the food you need. Well, maybe not all of it. And maybe it won't really be food, but there'll be calories there. And all of those calories are going to be sweetened with high fructose corn syrup so that you become a type 2 obese diabetic, and you'll be in fear because next time this comes around, we could say, hey, COVID-19, they said that it's a higher risk for people who are obese and have diabetes. Everybody's at risk because everybody's obese and has diabetes. Why? Because they stopped depending on their own ability to care for themselves, to grow their own food, to choose, make better choices in life, because they've destroyed their own economy locally in addition to the destruction that took place because of our fear of the germ that manifested in the last 6 months at least. But in reality, over centuries since Pasteur lied to the world. Claims are on his deathbed he recanted and said he was wrong, but I don't know. I don't remember being there. So I can't quote him on that, but people say it. And he was wrong. And so the idea that we must distance from one another is a criminal idea. It's a Luciferian idea. It's an adversarial idea to your divinity. And ultimately, this is a spiritual message. I really believe that. As I say, we can nuance and dance around all of the details of politics from time to time. Yeah, sure, it's fun. Like cat toys. Sure, they're fun. But ultimately, it's like, what is this really about? If we are to live our lives in fear of one another, is that a way to live, really? Is that how you want to live the rest of your life? Come on. Even you liberals that believe in everything you're being told by Fauci and Gates and the WHO. Is that really now suddenly that's how we got to live? We got to be frightened of one another. We need elitist overlords. Well, not the ones we don't like. But hey, if they say they like us and they say they believe the way we believe, they can rule us. They can throw out a pittance to us and we'll be okay with that because socialism is so much kinder and gentler. No, it's of the devil, in my opinion, because it takes away the essence of your humanity, the spiritual essence of who you are, to innovate, to co-create, to use your imagination, to be caring of yourself and others, not by force, but because the volition comes welling up from within because you love people. You love life. You're not afraid of life. You're not afraid of helping folks. This is what they want you to do, is become so afraid that you would not reach your hand out to help anybody. Therefore, the only people helping are those that are not. Through theft, they are taking from you and saying, we'll help you. We'll help others. And we'll throw out some stuff, and then we'll tie some strings to it, and we'll say, you got to get vaccinated. You have to have drugs. Oh, you're sequestered. You've tested positive on an antibody test that has no standard. But because you've tested, we've got to take you out of the home, or we got to take your kids out of the home. You go on and on and on, and you see where this leads. And none of it's a happy ending when it comes to collectivism, socialism, and communism. And that is the agenda for those who are rioting right now, whether they know it or not. I think a lot of them are agents provocateur and not really those that live there per se. Granted, there's going to be exceptions to that. So, state-by-state opening, Super Don. Any states jump out at you on this big list today? This is also in Forbes, I think, the state-by-state opening. Let me see here.
Any states jump out at me?
Right, yeah, they go, oh, I didn't know that, right? Because they're listing every state in the union, the 50 states here.
No, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't go through every single state. I just kind of zeroed in on my own just to see what they had to say.
Okay.
And I kind of already knew because I was here, but I know we're getting ready to go to phase 2. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what that means.
Phase 2, right?
Phase 2 is coming up next. We're in phase 1. Yeah. So they've opened up. You know, you can go into restaurants and eat now. Although I think they've got some social distancing things going on with the tables, and they can only allow a certain number of people, like 25 people, into buildings and stuff. So
well, we went out. I think it was Memorial Day night in North Carolina to a farm to table organic restaurant, which was so good, so delicious. Went out with Nia Peoples and her friend Marco from Italy, and Paul and his sister and her kids, Paul Bertero from Synergy Science. We had a great time. But yeah, it was mostly empty. But I get back and philosophize, if you will, on the whole big picture. You know, how we got we are so easily duped as a species to believe this stuff. And I sent to you an article, and I haven't been able to verify it, but apparently in Germany, there are some people within the government, high up in the government, that have now called into question the entire COVID pandemic, and they're trying to hush it up. I don't know if you've been able to check that out. It's something I want to do follow up on if that's true. I think the Ron Paul Liberty report reported on it. If there are factions within, I wouldn't be surprised, but ultimately we'll look back and go, yep, we were all duped about this as well. And then what do we do?
Yeah, we'll follow up on that. I hadn't had a chance to go through that entire article yet, but that's
how many times do we fall prey to those who cry, well, to use the proverbial fire in a crowded theater, right?
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't one. And then create a panic. And in that small example of the theater, of course, if there's a real fire, it becomes a, what do you call it? A boy who cried wolf scenario. You do it enough, no one's going to believe you. But the question is, how is it that we keep believing the authoritarians? Coming off of 9/11, yes, 19 years ago or so, almost 20 years, a lot of us fell prey to it. Then we started speculating, look back and go, oh, dude, we'll never fall for that again. But the play was not this time human terrorists. The play was microbial threats to our existence.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I think leading up to the coronavirus, there were a lot of people that had fallen into the not taking it seriously camp, because we talked about this before.
Sure.
You had the bird flu, swine flu, Ebola, blah, 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 and everything was just, it wasn't amounting to anything. They figured out a way to turn the coronavirus, though, into like, oh, see, it's for real. This is the real thing, and got everybody to wear masks and stay at home and lose their job and all that stuff. So
they massaged it into reality really well. I mean, they're master magicians, Don. They're master magicians in the art of illusion. And I look at all of the lead up to it, the fear of I get what you're saying too about the annual flu. This is going to be the worst ever. So there were a lot of skeptical people about it, but they painted this picture of like sudden death of hundreds of thousands of people, what was going on in China. And then we come to was it Oregon or Washington State, the nursing home where all these old people died? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it manifested out though, as we look back in retrospect, we go, yeah, it was old, sick people that were vulnerable. And even then, you could say, arguably, that they could have died by any number of medical interventions prior to that issue. And you see the reclassification and the recategorization. Even today, as they say, presumed positives again, they're coming back to saying, these people have it, we're not even testing them. Why does the intelligentsia of the world not point out that tests that have no standard are not valid tests? Why is it up to me and a few other people to point that out? Because people want to be duped. They want to be led. They want to be cared for by elite overlords, and they're willing to give up a lot of freedom in order to be cared for like cows and sheep in the field. Yes, there are a lot of people that are just fine with being sheeple. Tell me where I'm wrong with that one, Super D. Because what am I to conclude?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting, as you were saying that, it reminded me there was another story. Let's see if I can remember how to do this while I'm talking.
Okay.
That I saw that didn't make it into the rundown today. But I'm always looking for stories that I can connect the dots to what it is that we've seen or what we've been talking about. And there's this story here. Check this out. West Nile virus. Now, this is something I haven't heard about in a while, right? But here first West Nile virus positive mosquitoes. They must have like they were running behind the murder hornets, so they didn't get here. The murder hornets beat them to it, right? Found in California County. So this is in Southern California. And so I was reading through this, and I'm going, here we go, right? It's just one thing after another. Now here comes West Nile virus. That we need to be concerned about and scared about. And the thing that struck me on this, look at the similarity between the West Nile virus and what they were talking about with the coronavirus, right?
Can you read that sentence you just highlighted?
The Mayo Clinic warns people who are older, as well as those with pre-existing medical conditions, are more susceptible to the virus. there is no vaccine or treatment to prevent the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. West Nile virus, right? That's the next thing that's going to be happening.
Fear me. It's another virus. This one
it's
about.
Like coronavirus. Yeah, we did pretty good on that, but people aren't really paying attention. They're not taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
People are not staying at home. What's going to be the next thing to come along? Is that being cynical?
Mm-hmm.
Is that being a conspiracy theorist?
Dude, yeah, you bring it up and you go, all right, it's the next thing to be afraid of. Constant state of fear, a dangerous state to live in because it is more likely you will die in that state. And what do I mean by that? Super D, you know this, fight or flight. We remember this from high school, learning about the fight or flight response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is designed to be a short-term survival mechanism to get you out of harm's way in a hurry. If you live in that state, elevated cortisol levels, restricted blood flow to the vital organs, more blood flow to the external movement, you do not survive long-term because your immune system is shut down during fight or flight. And so if they can ratchet up your permanent state of fear, then you are vulnerable not only to suggestions because your higher brain is also not getting the blood flow it needs to kind of process information. And therefore, you are manipulated into belief systems that largely our friends, not exclusively, right now it seems to be on the political left, go, well, yeah, I'm afraid, so just send anything my way. Send me another vaccine. It's sure, I'll take the experiment, whatever. I'm just so afraid. You said virus. I say, help me, help me. And you don't think rationally anymore about what is it that they're injecting into me and what could be the outcome of that. Could it be worse than what you're telling me is the virus? That now in retrospect we find once again the message is if you are old and sick and vulnerable, pre-existing conditions, comorbidities, multiple medications, immunocompromised, immunosuppressed, all in all, the same thing. What they're describing to you without saying it is that our germ theory is wrong. The law of the terrain explains it. They admit it right there in the fear porn that Super Don just put out about now West Nile as the next thing comes up. Oh, it's coming back in California, West Nile. Who's vulnerable? Those who are vulnerable. Why are they vulnerable? Well, they have pre-existing conditions. Why do they have pre-existing conditions? Well, let's look at their lifestyle. They're eating fast food, processed food, trans fats, artificial sweeteners, or excessive amounts of sweeteners, corn syrup inclusive. They are being injected with flu shots, with mercury still, and others aluminum-laden shots of different varieties. They're eating genetically modified ingredients. They're spraying Roundup on their lawns and then wondering, why am I sick? Is it bad gene stock? Do you have a drug to save me? Oh, I can't afford the drug. Let me go on some kind of socialized, gentle, kind, loving system like Health Canada has to pay for my drugs. My argument is that that's a demonic thing to do, not a helpful and loving thing to do. Because for the most part, there's nobody suffering from a drug deficiency disease. Now, some of you will say, well, what about people who are type 2 diabetics? Okay, let's say type 2, right? Adult onset, they used to say. And you're relying on metformin, which is, I think, a generic at this point. I think it's not in patent anymore, so it's pretty much out there. And you go, well, I think it's nice that if we can make those drugs free for the people who need them. And you say, see, Robert, there's a drug deficiency situation, because if they don't get their metformin, they could die with the type 2. No. Type 2 diabetes is reversible. And as I get to our final story of hour 2, no, is it hour 1? No, Brian Hooker will be here hour 2. Can't wait for Brian to join us. He'll be here momentarily. We look to the FDA, our beloved Fear and Death Administration, and they are here to save us. They are here to protect us only, right? They're not responsible for approving substances that are ultimately the leading cause of death. Oh, third leading. Okay, third leading. But do they contribute to the first and second? Yes, they do. Cancer and heart disease. The drugs can cause those things. The FDA is now, again, pushing for Metformin Recalls, that very drug I mentioned for type 2 diabetes and used for other things. They're pushing recalls for 5 drug makers because it's generic, so a bunch of drug makers are making it. because they found carcinogenic contamination. This is not a new story, but it's an ongoing story. Despite our Fear and Death Administration being on the job, they still haven't cracked the nut of no carcinogens in your metformin. And this is after they were pushing for recalls of heartburn medicine Zantac and Sartan. Sounds a little bit like Satan. Not the kind made from wheat, but gluten, but blood pressure drugs for the same reason.
Shouldn't they charge you extra for that?
Yeah, we throw in a little MDMA for you. And I don't think that's MDMA, because isn't that like the date rape drug? This is not that.
MDMA, I think, is what they call ecstasy, if I'm not mistaken.
MDMA,
Party drug.
not NDMA. So this is N-nitrosodimethylamine. I'll have to get Brian Hooker to pronounce this stuff. It's way beyond my limited skills. But he's a PhD. He can do it.
So here's the question you got to ask yourself. Why is it, because they already did the recalls and the stuff on the Zantac and all that stuff like that. Now it's metformin. How is this getting into the drugs?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a weird coincidence that
we are producing carcinogens in the lab next door? It somehow keeps falling into the vat of metformin. We don't know what's and how do the FDA?
Is this being made by the same company?
5 different companies, they said.
5 companies. They all end up with this chemical or something. I mean, obviously there has to
be.
Could
it be that somebody's targeting weak, chronically ill, diabetic people for elimination?
No, I don't know. That's probably not the first place I would go.
I had to ask it just to get a good reaction from you.
Are these the drugs that are being made in China?
So I look at this, Super Don, just to kind of finish up on my thoughts here. Yeah. No drug deficiency, syndrome, disease, etc. Well, if you don't have your drugs, you're going to die. I'm like, wait a second. Here's an example. A lot of people on this drug, metformin, glucophage with carcinogens, approved by the FDA.
With carcinogens.
And you know what? What have we been saying for years? 100 micrograms of 100% whole food glucose tolerance factor, they call it GTF chromium, 3, maybe even 4 times a day, might cost $30 a month, maybe $30 a month. I want you to think about that in terms of reversing type 2 diabetes, not by accident, not by luck, but because it is an abject deficiency of that mineral that we could replace it for pennies on the drug dollar, even though metformin may be considered cheap because it's generic. But the chromium doesn't have, because it's not hexavalent chromium we're talking about. It's not chromium polynicotinate or picolinate. Garbage. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 100% whole food forms, which you can get from our buddy Jonathan at choosetobehealthy.com. Take that every day, 3, maybe 4 times a day. You will reverse type 2 diabetes. I don't make a cent from this. I don't sell it. I'm just telling you that is the inevitable result. And now guess what else would happen? No longer type 2 diabetic. What other risks are going away? Obesity is likely to drop. Your cravings for sugar and carbohydrates likely to drop without the abject absence of that mineral that's necessary for delivery of energy to and from the cells. And so we come back to this collectivist ideology that says, well, the only way we can help people is collectivize it, have one bill to the federal government, steal it surreptitiously from the U.S. taxpayer, and then we'll throw free metformin to all the diabetics. With, yes, a carcinogen in it. Because the FDA seems not to be able to get a handle on that. I don't know if I'm making a point or not, but I'm ready to take a break because I see Brian Hooker's ready to join us. What do you think, Super D? Should we break early so we get more Brian Hooker? Thumbs up? Thumbs up? Yeah. All right, y'all, get ready. Our good buddy, Professor Dr. Brian Hooker, a new study. He tells me it took 1.5 years of peer review to get this thing published. I'm going to say good luck to anybody that's going to try and get it withdrawn after the fact, after 1.5 years of peer review. It's like, really? What did you miss? A dotted I? I don't even think that's going to be missed in this case. We'll talk to him about what are the results of children who have been vaccinated before the age, I shall say, of 1 versus those who have not, maybe not at all. And what are their health outcomes? It's a doozy. Is the mainstream media going to cover it or cover it up? We'll find out after this break. Thanks for being here. This is the place. Health, freedom, and healing liberty live. The power to heal is yours.
The Robert Scott Bell Show. The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Have you ever watched a movie with superheroes and villains? If so, you already understand the science of drinking hydrogen-enriched water and how to unlock true health. Allow me to explain. In our bodies, we have a natural struggle between superheroes and villains, with molecular hydrogen being the superhero and oxidative stress the villain. So how does knowing that give you the tools to unlock true health? Your body is naturally designed to fight oxidative stress through specific bacteria in the gut that creates hydrogen on their own. Pretty awesome, right? So why does this matter? Well, in most people, the hydrogen-creating bacteria is gone, and cancer and disease soon follow. So the real question is, why aren't we trying to fix this every day? Well, the answer is simple. It's hard. Even the most healthy of individuals who biohack take months or years to achieve this balance. But how do we get there without taking months or even years? After years of study and development, we discovered and designed the perfect technology that made it all possible. We call this technology Echo H2 Water. Within minutes of drinking hydrogen-rich water from our Echo Hydrogen water machines, you are back in control, balanced, and feeling amazingly hydrated and healthy. Having your own Echo Hydrogen water machine is kinda like having your own team of superheroes on call, always available to fight the villains in your body. Pretty cool, right? But don't just take our word for it. Get your Echo H2 water machine today and quickly bring your body into balance with hydrogen.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
I listen to get accurate, up-to-date information.
I've learned so much from him.
It is awesome. It's the best entertainment that I've found.
You rock the health world. Keep it up. I love you.
Now, the voice of health, freedom, and liberty, here's Robert Scott Bell.
All right, rocking the health world, and I am so excited for this hour of the Robert Scott Bell Show. You guys have had enough of me and Super D. Now we need Super B. That'd be Brian Hooker, PhD, to be specific. He's so smart. I'm just gonna go to take a nap right now, and y'all wake me up when he's done telling us what he needs to tell us. Hey, Brian Hooker.
Hey, Robert Scott Bell. I need my Robert Scott Bell time. It's been too long.
You know, I must have said something to really upset you because it has been a long time, and I'm just trying to figure out. I can't remember what did I do to upset Brian Hooker that he hadn't been on the show in so long.
Nothing. You didn't do anything to upset me. I've just been hunkered down trying to get this stupid paper published. It's not stupid, but
no, I know what you're saying though. But if you tell me like you did a year and a half to get this thing peer reviewed. Is there anything that was left unturned? I can't imagine.
It was really super rigorous. I had the first final manuscript done in December 2018. Mm-hmm. The manuscript was done. It was on the rails, ready to go. And I submitted it to the first journal. Second, third, fourth journal, same thing. Actually, the third journal that we submitted to invited me to never submit anything to that journal ever again in my entire life.
Wow.
And I got this like rejection letter that said, "Please don't ever come here again."
Was it something I said? Did you not like my clothing? What happened?
Absolutely, it must. It's something smelled weird, and they just basically gave me the left-footed fellowship, and then a year ago, on June 18th, we submitted to Sage Open Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And the peer review process took exactly 10 months for them. And it went through 4 rounds of review. Generally, papers like that go through 2 rounds of review. It took 6 months to get our first round of reviewer comments. And so we got our first round of reviewer comments in November of 2019. And we've been working on rebutting comments and revisions. This is me and my co-author, Neil Zell Miller, who is amazing guy.
Brilliant guy, great author, of course.
Absolutely.
Miller's Guide. And you know, you guys put your head together and put a very important paper together.
It was fun. I love working with Neil. He is so calm.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a medical journalist, and he's such an excellent writer, and he sees beyond what's on the page. He has such a special knack of being able to do that. So I was so blessed. I brought him into the process during peer review. I actually did the work, the statistics work, prior to working with Neil, but I needed somebody who could kind of see through everything. And Neil was the perfect choice, and it made such an intense contribution that I made sure that he was a co-author, and we're still collaborating. We're going to continue to collaborate after this.
I like that collaboration. By the way, it is published. We have a link to the press release over at Children's Health Defense. It says new research study clarifies health outcomes in vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. You can see the actual visual as it appears at Sage Open Medicine, analysis of health outcomes in vaccinated and unvaccinated children, developmental delays, asthma, ear infections, and gastrointestinal disorders. I don't think it's a hyperlink thing, but I think we can get there eventually to show. Here it is, the study. I'm going to click on that and open it up directly at the journals at Sage Pub so you can see it. The objective, the aim of the study was to compare the health of vaccinated versus unvaccinated pediatric populations. Now, Brian, this is it shouldn't be a controversy. It should have been like basic 101 safety review after market scenarios. Like let's look at these outcomes. Let's find out who's been fully vaccinated, partially vaccinated, not vaccinated. Let's look at general health outcomes. It seems to be rooted in what I would say common sense science to ask these questions and then report on them. But how many peer-reviewed articles of this kind of scope have been published thus far that you know of prior to this one?
Very few articles have been, the tip of the spear was the paper by Anthony Mawson. And his paper was published in 2017. I'm good friends with Tony, a big fan of his work. And he had a group of over 600 individuals that actually responded to a survey. The thing that made ours unique was that we were blessed with the ability to work with 3 independent pediatricians across the country and go directly into their electronic medical records and mine data. So when we look at
blinded to you guys, so you didn't know the names of the people, right? I mean, the HIPAA and all that stuff. So you're looking at the data of patients in different pediatric practices and the reported health outcomes post-vaccination based on their vaccine records. Again, you're not. I think about all the things they attacked Andy Wakefield for, right? When he came out with his review of what he. And I'm just saying, after a year and a half, you had to say, you know what, we got to look at this because they're going to come back on this. And then all of the things that had never been done before in a retrospective like this.
We really worked hard to make sure that this was completely rigorous, that we were abiding by all the rules and regulations, that we had the appropriate permissions. Because this is a retrospective study, theoretically, you don't need institutional review board. You don't need an ethics committee. We got ethics committee approval anyway to make sure that we were sound. We want to make sure, things like conflicts of interest are lock solid, that, everything is absolutely reported. So people have a perspective of my background, people have a perspective of Neil's background.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was nice to have our feet held to the fire, because I felt like, my hat's off to Sage Open Medicine, because I felt like they were working with us to make sure that we had a paper that was retraction proof.
Right.
I don't know if anything is fully retraction proof, but we can at least call it retraction resistant.
Yeah, I like that. And the thing is, you've been challenged via this process, which I think is ultimately, if we say a positive side, if peer review was actually working, the
Right.
challenges would be there to strengthen a paper or, destroy it because it's not valid. And the whole
Right.
idea is to kind of rifle through it so that what comes out in there is like, man, this is pretty much beyond reproach. Not to say that anything couldn't be challenged. Everything can be. But in this particular, I'm trying to get a sense of how much you went through because of the awareness of everything previous, including other peer-reviewed articles you've had, and how viciously they are attacked simply because the subject matter is, it's off of the little index card. You're like, that wasn't allowed on that subject. No, that's not on the card. You can't do that. You're like, yes, we can. And we did, and it should be done. And so as we come through to the understandings or the findings here, and that's, a big part of what I want to go with you now on. What did we learn from this based on the previous articles that were published, or even what we might say is hearsay, reports, self-reporting? How is it matching up with things that I've observed as a homeopath, traveling around the world and witnessing children and their health or lack of health based on their vaccine status to some degree? The healthiest children that I've seen around the world are the least vaccinated or not vaccinated at all. And now I'm talking about chronic diseases, chronic maladies, not acute infections per se, but even in this article that you have reference to ear infections, which tend to be more chronic than acute, even though there's an acute phase within it. Not trying to confuse everybody, but
Right.
These are my observations.
So what we wanted to make sure that this study was lock solid. So when I originally got the data, I wanted to have a window of vaccination and then a window of diagnosis, because heaven knows, you don't want the diagnosis to precede the vaccine. It is if there is a causal relationship, then the vaccine is before the diagnosis. So we did a cutoff age of vaccination of 1 year and 15 days. So they could go through their first birthday, go to their, what we call the 1 year well baby checkup, and get their vaccinations, which could include MMR, chickenpox, or whatever. So we wanted to capture that particular window. Then the next window was the window where they were diagnosed with one of 5 different maladies, which was gastrointestinal disorders, developmental delays, asthma, ear infections, and then we had a control diagnosis of head injury. We know that when a kid, bangs their head on the playground and has to go and get stitches, that is not associated with vaccination. Okay, so we needed a control diagnosis that basically would say, if we found positive relationships with some of our diagnoses, we would need to show that our control diagnosis was not related to vaccination. So we set up this study design that was as rigorous as we could possibly make it. And we found that children who were vaccinated were twice as likely to be diagnosed with developmental delays. And this is just the vaccines during the first year of life. It does not regard anything after the first birthday plus 15 days.
Wow.
They were over twice as likely to be diagnosed with at least 1 ear infection, but including multiple ear infections. And then they were 4.5 times more likely to be diagnosed with asthma. And so these results just jumped off the page. They were highly statistically significant. Any way that you sliced, diced, or julienne them, they were highly statistically significant. So we saw this, and this was a minimum follow-up of 3 years. So the children had been followed from birth by the same pediatrician until at least their 3rd birthday, and most of them were beyond that. The average age of the sampling that we took was about 6 years of age. So the children had been followed up on average for 6 years in the same practice, by the same pediatrician, given the same vaccinations. 30% were unvaccinated, 70% were vaccinated. So we had a good, healthy population in both vaccinated and unvaccinated.
Dr. Brian Hooker, I want some clarification just because if I'm somewhat confused a little bit, just going, I'm not sure I heard you right. We talk about 1 year and 15 days. So the assessment of vaccination in that time period or no vaccines in that time period. What do you mean by saying cutting it off at that point? Because you're also talking about children who are much older as well in terms of outcomes. Is it just that you didn't concern yourself with if they had additional vaccines or not after that point? You're only looking at the set that occurred within the first year and 15 days. Just clarify that for me.
That is correct. We only looked at vaccines in the first year of life, and there were a couple of reasons why we did that. Number one, we wanted a cutoff age so we could have the vaccines occur first and then the diagnosis occur afterwards. Now, that's not usually a problem for things like developmental delays, which are diagnosed when children are older. But things like ear infections, if a child had an ear infection prior to 1 year of age, we didn't consider them in the analysis. So we had to have some type of cutoff to make sure that the vaccines preceded the diagnosis. So the vaccines were first, diagnosis was second.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, to gather the data of vaccines happening in year 2, year 3, et cetera, you would now be counting in vaccinations after the diagnoses of these things, these factors you were saying. Again, there's a lot of complexity to this, and if I'm hearing it, I'm willing to say, you know what, I really want to understand the reasons for it, because I know in peer review process they would target these things like, well, which came first scenario. Was it a genetic issue? These are always the arguments thrown that they were born with this stuff, and so you're able to delineate between those that were vaccinated not in that first year of life and the health outcomes from that point, not trying to complicate, confuse, or add more vaccines into the mix that could then end up, I don't know if it would be diluting the results or it could be introducing confounding factors. How would you describe that?
What we wanted to make sure that we were giving vaccines the best shot possible. If there, I want to make sure that beyond a shadow of a doubt that I wasn't, I come at this naturally. I have a vaccine injured child. I do have reported conflicts of interest. Does that preclude me from doing the research? No, not at all. No. If I'm upfront with my conflicts of interest, if I'm taking care of my biases and my study design can eliminate those biases, then yes, I'm going to go ahead and do that research. But I want to make sure, if anything, by cutting those off, then we had children in the unvaccinated group that did get vaccines after their first birthday. If anything, it would tend towards what we call the null hypothesis, or not finding a relationship, because we had children in our unvaccinated group that did later on get vaccinations. And so, if anything, we were giving a little bit more of a benefit to not finding those particular results. And the fact that they jumped off of the page clearly, and compared to our control diagnosis, head injury, which was not, we never saw a fully significant result, then, and we want to include head injury also because arguably, a peer reviewer made the argument, well, what about healthcare seeking behavior? It could be that individuals that don't vaccinate, that just don't go to the doctor as much, so they don't have a chance of getting these diagnoses. And we just did not see that with our control diagnosis. Otherwise, we would see significance. So, so we did that. And we want to make sure that that window of vaccination was short enough that we could capture early diagnoses that happened after that, 1 year and 15-day time period.
I'm with you, and I apologize to everybody going, let Brian get to the point of the results as you've mentioned, because that's the big money aspect of, hey, what did we learn? And you already kind of hinted at what those conclusions were or what the findings were, but I really needed, for my own purpose and edification, to understand a little bit of the study design. Obviously, there's more to delve into, and for some that might be like, I'm just bored to tears over this. My apologies. But I think it's important as well for those who are standing ready to try and attempt anything they can find to discredit the study, to eliminate the findings, that put vaccines on notice that the health outcomes are not preferable for those that say, I'd rather not have kids with chronic diseases of any kind. And there's a relationship there that now you're determining and validating through the peer review process. that is something that is also validating to me and other holistically inclined healthcare providers and even medical doctors who have pointed out and observed the same thing, and there are many. So it's not that we're doing this in a vacuum, that you suddenly discovered something that was unknown to anybody, but through this study design could show a definitive causal link that should require more investigation, more questioning, more studies, more peer review, not elimination of the relationship because we don't like what you found, Brian Hooker.
Right. We need, obviously we need further study for, to understand this phenomenon. There are huge repositories of information and agencies that just refuse to look at this. The dirty secret, I have been investigated and used the CDC's vaccine safety data link, which is 9 million patients, 2 million children, that we could do these studies. The dirty little secret about that database is there are unvaccinated kids in there. They could do the same study. They could do the same study on a much larger scale. And, if anything, if we had, a CDC with a conscience, which we don't, then this would be impetus to do further research, to understand, to do a retrospective study with these types of health outcomes, which would be facile. It would be very, very easy to do with these large databases. We just don't have access to them to do it.
Well, are they saying we're not releasing the data to you, similar to what transpired, with your interaction with the hashtag CDC whistleblower going all the way back to the Vax film and the things that you encountered only got pretty much through initially the Freedom of Information Act request, and then, of course, developing a relationship with the whistleblower, you know what I'm saying? And
right.
What was released to you, or indications to how to get that information released.
So there's a big edifice there that you have to penetrate in order to get to the vaccine safety data link. Usually what they'll try to do instead is to give you these much, much smaller pared down data sets that are completely meaningless. And there's no way that you can do what we call independent hypothesis testing in these particular data sets. Yeah, I've gotten some of the data sets. I've even published on some of the data sets, but really the gold standard would be having somebody go in, like I did with Dr. Mark Geyer and David Geyer, going into the vaccine safety data link with our own independent hypothesis, with our own independent study design, and then repeating the analyses that I did on a small scale with 2,000 patients.
So is there let's say a plan? You talked about working with Neil Miller some more, which would be great, but to expand this or to go to other doctors in their practice to see if this is a similar pattern that is manifested?
My hope is to be able to expand this study. It would be much more meaningful if we had about 5 times the amount of patients, say if we could increase our study size to about 10,000 patients. And so, the nice thing about getting this publicized is I've already had positive contacts with practitioners who are the types of practitioners that would look at the study design, realize that there's integrity in the study design, and also would be skeptical of everything that they heard from the CDC. And so, there are individuals that are coming out of the woodwork. My hope is to be able to expand out this network, to get more electronic medical records, and to be able to satisfactorily show them, no, you're not putting your patients at harm for disclosure or anything like that. We're using this information so we can better understand what are the long-term health effects of vaccination, which we've been crying out for years and years.
So what I want to do when we come back from this break, Brian, can you stick with us for most of the hour? I don't want to take you away from classes that you're teaching if they're still ongoing. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it's great to have you back, my brother, my friend. I appreciate you so very much. And we're going to go as intimated. The results, what do they mean? What are these numbers when we say double the amount of something? How does that happen? How do you come to that conclusion? And then, where we go from here with this information, how you can help share this information and perhaps bring it to your health professionals that are either skeptical, which is okay. Healthy skepticism is legit. Right. We want it. We welcome it. But when we come to a mind that is so closed that it can't encounter information that, let's say, violates its fundamental dogma or belief system, then we get into levels of cognitive dissonance that we can't bridge that chasm for people that are there. But for those who are at least open-minded enough to discuss what we're finding here, we've got Brian Hooker on. We'll be back with him and the results of the new study published just recently after a year and a half of peer review. And I want to say thanks to our friends at Synergy Science and their key technology out of Germany that is helping to protect us from the dangers of EMF, harmful EM field radiation. And you'll learn about it right now.
Today, we live in an omnipresent cloud of charged particles emitted by electronic devices, electromagnetic fields, WLAN, and radio waves. These particles penetrate our bodies and heat the water in our body tissues. Recent scientific studies have shown that this particle flux not only heats the cells in our bodies as if we were in a microwave oven, but damages them as well. At Key Technologies, we want to protect you from the negative effects of such particles, so we have developed the Key Home Cell and other products. The Key Home Cell creates a protective field that works like a filter, intercepting any dangerous particles before they can enter your body. Here we have a partial look at the inner workings of the Key Home Cell. The Key Home Cell generates a charge exchange between the water tubes, thereby discharging free electrons and releasing them into the room. Within 24 hours, the Key Home Cell creates a torus field. The free electrons formed in the torus use their negative charge to bind to the positively charged harmful particles, thereby rendering them harmless to you. The torus field has an effective range of 16.4 feet above and below, and 24.6 feet around the device. The torus field created by the Key Home Cell is transmitted and provides you with protection through the walls of your home. Not only humans and animals are shielded from harmful radiation, but plants and food too. Whether mobile radio waves or WLAN, any particles that come within the torus field can no longer cause any harm to you or your family. The Key Home Cell provides you with all-around protection, allowing you to communicate with absolute peace of mind when using your cell phone or any other electronic devices. The Key Home Cell's free electrons are transmitted into the water through the torus field and repairing the water structure that was destroyed by radiation particles. Water regains its ideal vibrating hexagonal grid structure. The difference is easy to taste and can be proven with laboratory testing. This type of perfect hexagonal water structure is found in fresh spring and healing water and has also been seen in snowflakes. The same effect happens with our food, which also contains water. The Key Home Cell greatly reduces radiation exposure from cell phones, laptops, WLAN transmitters, mobile terminals, and other sources of radiation. The Key Home Cell drastically reduces the thermal stress on your body tissue. It is very fast and very easy. With the Key Home Cell, you will experience a new quality of well-being within your home and more life energy without any unhealthy exposure to radiation.
I see you in action. I like it.
All right, it's Brian Hooker talking in the background. Let me bring him to the forefront. And here he is, professor, PhD, researcher, teacher, friend, and dad, super dad, and happy Father's Day this month. I would say I would love to have a cookout with you, my brother, and the family's getting them together. We are here 2 hours a day, 6 days a week on the Robert Scott Bell Show, and you can go to robertscottbell.com and sign up for email alerts just in case we get banished by the various ways we get out to the world, because this kind of information, although I think presented in a very rational way, is threatening to those who want to hold power and sway over our belief systems, over our behaviors, over our interaction with medicine and doctors and government and media. There's so much riding on the vaccine belief system. And it's more than just whether diseases return, as they say. That's the thing. Oh, my gosh, they'll be back. It'll be worse than ever. It's more than that. It's about control of your behavior and your belief system, because what of, Brian Hooker, those that are outside of the traditional now MD, PhD scenario in scholastic settings, we are excluded from the table of discussion. Homeopaths, herbalists, some naturopaths, certainly what I call the more traditional naturopaths. A lot of the naturopaths going through certain schools on the West Coast and other areas have been enveloped and devoured by an allopathic curricula, flexion report inspired. Yes. So competing thoughts, they rarely get to be engaged and discussed, much less scrutinized in a healthy intellectual and skeptical way, which is what peer review is about. And so as we are having you back on today, I want to go back to show everybody in the publication here. We have it linked up in the show notes at robertscottbell.com, and scroll back up to the top. It's at journals.sagepub.com, and it's the analysis of health outcomes in vaccinated and unvaccinated children developmental delays, asthma, ear infections, and gastrointestinal disorders. We spent a bit of the first half of this interview with Brian talking about some of the study design, setup, just questions I had that maybe not the exciting part. He did reveal some of the results. And one of our super fans out there, she's our bodyguard, and she controls what's going on in the flow of the discussion group. Ula says, what was the size of the control group again? So we have clarity there.
Hi, Ula. Hey, the size of the control group, the what we would consider the unvaccinated control was 600 patients. 600 patients were completely unvaccinated by their first birthday.
Wow. Okay. So with that, I look back at my own history, my own health conditions as a child of the 60s, the canary in the coal mine of Generation X, having multiple ear infections, borderline asthmatic. I had a lot of respiratory ailments. I had tremendous amount of gastrointestinal disorders for the first 18, 19 years of my life, really till I was about 24, and I figured a way homeopathically, herbally, more holistically with dietary shifts to correct the 24 years prior. So a lot of what's in this study was me, and I was vaccinated fully according to the schedule way back when, which did include the smallpox vaccine. They still gave it when I was a baby, and I had adverse reactions to that. So what are we to say of the outcome of another study that said 54% or so of young Americans are chronically ill? Now, I know that's not in your study, but to acknowledge that, to say, could we be seeing, as the study is showing, I believe, a relationship between the vaccine schedule in the first year of life and at least some of these chronic manifestations?
But you have to remember, children are intensely vaccinated in their first year of life more than any other year of life. I was astounded. I just wanted to do the analysis and look and see how many vaccines children were getting in each year of life. And they get 21 different vaccines. That's 21 different needle sticks, by their first birthday.
Some with multiple antigens, correct?
That is correct. That doesn't account for multiple antigens. So if you add on top of that, like multiple antigens from the DTaP or the MMR or other combination vaccines that are given, some are hexavalent vaccines. They have 6 different types of antigens in that vaccination. So the children are getting their full wallop of the vaccination schedule in their first year of life. And so that's why one of the reasons why we focused on this. And when you look at the vaccine uptake, these pediatricians in these pediatric offices having 30% unvaccinated children were a bit out of the mainstream of what you would expect. You would expect 90 to 95% compliance. And when you have that level of compliance from what we saw, the more vaccines the children received, the worse the outcomes were. We did have a portion of our study, which we called the quartile analysis, and we separated the group that was vaccinated in quarters. So the first quarter was 1 to 5 vaccines. The second quarter was, I believe, 6 to 9 and 6 to 10. Then the third quarter was 11 and 12, and then the fourth quarter was fully 13 to 21 vaccines, all in the first year of life. So we saw some children that got very few, some children that got all or almost all, and the ones that got the more vaccinations, we would see the relationship strengthen, where there were more children that were coming down with developmental delays, asthma, ear infections, and gastrointestinal disorders, the more vaccines they received in their first year of life.
So my personal clinical observations that align with many of my colleagues, whether they be medical or non-medical, seeing patients over the years, the more vaccinated, the more highly vaccinated the kid is, the more chronic manifestations, chronic ailments or illnesses we see. And that seems to be playing itself out in this peer-reviewed article of yours, having assessed with the limited number, albeit how many total participants, if we look at the number again?
2,047.
Okay, so it's still not a teeny number. Obviously, we'd like to see, as you said, over 10,000, and maybe that can happen as we reach out to more doctors that would be willing to participate in this way. But if we could come back to the proverbial money shot, what were the numbers again? You said it before, the double the rate, that kind of thing for each of these, let's say, chronic ailments or manifestations.
Right. What that means, sort of, if I put it in, break it down to its most elemental terms, and it's a bit crude because there's a lot of modeling ease in there that we want to make sure that we compare boys to boys and girls to girls. And if they were born in the same year, they probably got the same vaccine schedule. So we didn't do cross comparisons between different years of birth. But what that means is when I say that the odds or the amount of diagnosis that we saw of developmental delays was twice as much, that means that in the vaccinated group, they had twice as many children proportionally that had developmental delays than the unvaccinated group. Okay, so if we had even numbers, say we had 200 in each, and it was twice as much, that would mean that there were 5 children with developmental delays in the unvaccinated and 10 children in the vaccinated group with developmental delays. That would be a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, so that's crudely, that's what it's like. And the things that stuck out of the page, you don't want to see any child get diagnosed with a developmental delay. Okay, and certainly children can get developmental delays and can have other exposures besides vaccines that would cause them. And so we're not saying that, not vaccinating is going to cure all ills and is not going to eliminate all exposures to your children. But the one that jumped out of the page to me, which is such a huge chronic disorder right now, is we saw 4.5 times as many cases of asthma.
All right, so that's not double, that's 4.5 times the number of cases of asthma.
Correct.
Okay. Again, the problem I see here is, as you know, with those that hold and cling to vaccines as if it were the most important religious dogma belief system in their entire, they don't want to acknowledge this simply because what the conclusion becomes is that their sacrament, if you will, in a religious phraseology perspective, is not beyond reproach, for instance. Not that anything in science should be beyond reproach, because then it becomes more akin to a religious belief. But what you've done is probably, I assess with the amount of time it took to review this and revise it, whatever it was, to rise to the challenges that were made to it, was to get beyond, I say in a court of law, you go to reasonable doubt. You go, all right, listen, this is clear here. The data is clear. That's not likely in dispute. The results of causation will probably be attacked. And they'll say, well, correlation, right? But you try to deal with that beyond correlation, right, at a certain point, or can you not definitively say that? Or are you just leaving it with, hey, there's something that's a very strong relationship here. We need more looking into this. Obviously, there are people that have a bias like me that say this only confirms what I already know to be true. Some would say confirmation bias. Others would say the confirmation bias the other way would go, well, that doesn't mean anything. Somehow it would be dismissed through a sleight of hand and not acknowledge the level of scrutiny that this paper has gone through to get to this point.
Right. And what I've seen in the Twitter wars, I stay off of Twitter.
Much
my
healthier.
wife tweets, and but what I've seen of the Twitter wars, the sort of default argument against the paper is, well, it was such a small sample size, it doesn't really matter. It's what's called a convenient sample, which is a term that's used in statistics for any sample that isn't a complete random sample of a population. If you have a complete random sample of a population, it's not convenience. But any type of sampling, which I believe mine is absolutely valid and is affirmed by medical diagnoses that are not only accepted by the pediatricians, but by the insurance companies themselves, because we use the ICD-9 and ICD-10 coding systems. And so there are standards for these diagnoses. And so, I see, the standard arguments, correlation doesn't equal causation. But boy, when you look at the preponderance of studies and what has been compiled over at childrenshealthdefense.org, now we have fully 60 studies that are looking at different scenarios of vaccination versus unvaccination. You're seeing the same story over and over and over again. And these are peer-reviewed studies that we pulled directly off of PubMed. And I've been a part of this project helping out Bobby Kennedy with this, sort of as a side gig, and, which has kind of focused my efforts too on my own vaccinated versus unvaccinated child study. And so at a bare minimum, you have to say, no, we have to look at this further. we have to look at this further. And, I would go, if I put my dad hat on, I would go further with that. But with my scientist hat on, then I say, no, we need to do this yesterday.
If you're just tuning in, Brian Hooker, our guest this hour, PhD, Associate Professor of Biology at Simpson University, and he's doing great work and has for many years. Friends of this show and many of our friends, and just an all-around great guy. And, just stunning revelations within, if I can call it that, the scientific peer-reviewed publication process to get to this point. And in the show notes at robertscottbell.com, as you scroll down today's notes, June 2nd, 2020, new research study clarifies health outcomes in vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. These are the stories we've been telling for years. Many of our friends have been telling them. Some of them are physicians. Some of them are just parents that have been discredited simply because they're parents. But of course, the stories that they tell are more valid than anything I think any scientist could tell, because they witnessed, what was life before, what was life after. And what I gather from this new article, Brian, is that you've kind of taken that concept of what life is like before and after in that first year of life and try to assess what are the factors that may be contributing to health outcomes or lack of health, good, positive health outcomes, and seeing clearly there is some relationship. Some people will still argue till the day they die that there's no link, but it's getting harder and harder to do so. And I think the article that you and Neil Miller put together here is going to help move what we call science itself forward, because science should not be dogma and merely belief systems, much less consensus, but a gathering of facts that tell a story via connecting them in a challenged way, which you described being very challenged through this process before it was accepted for publication.
Right. And I'm glad, and like I said before, I'm glad my feet were held to the fire. It is with no joy that I go and I criticize the current vaccination schedule. It's not like I get my jollies from doing this, or I'm vindictive, or I have a score to settle, or anything like this. I am a scientist. Okay, I want the truth regarding anything to get out. I want to be able to seek and search for the truth. And, we've had this door shut on us for such a long time where, individuals with the FDA, the CDC, any part of the National Institutes of Health have basically just said, oh, the science is settled, the science is settled, the science is settled. And, as a good scientist, there are very, very few things that are settled as science. They are called laws, and they include things like gravity and thermodynamics. But other than that, I'm sorry, the rest of it's just up for grabs, okay? And we need to make sure that we are opening doors and not closing doors to inquiry.
When I hear someone say the science is settled, I hear somebody who is very anti-science in reality and promoting of a dogma, a belief system. I'm a spiritual guy, and I love people of faith. I think it's important to bring that back into science, because science without that can be very dangerous, is very dangerous and destructive. Yes. And yet I don't think science contravenes religion and spirituality. I think those that think so have a very limited and dogmatic worldview and don't take into consideration the consequences of their own biases played out in the very real world when we talk about negative health outcomes based on a desire to prevent what they call an infectious disease or manifestation that may be very well handled by an immune system and may be very helpful to the maturation of that immune system, not considered, not discussed. Here it is, of course. And then sacrificing the very lives of those people, even if they survive the vaccination process. What kind of lives do they lead moving forward? From mild chronic conditions to the most severe, those are labeled in the autism spectrum. Yes, some deaths that do occur and are categorized and even acknowledged within the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Courts, which was put into play in 1986 and then activated a year and a half or so later. So we have a lot that we're working against us because it is more held together by a worldview of belief rather than, as you say, a scientific scrutiny that would say, well, we've weighed out the pros and the cons. We've given everybody the information that we would say rises to the level of what we would call fully informed consent so that people can make the best decisions about do they want to do this or not, rather than being coerced, deceived, pressured, forced, etc., into an activity, an intervention that has not full-on positive health outcomes.
We are in such a huge public health crisis in the United States, and it has nothing to do with coronavirus, has nothing to do with measles, has nothing to do with influenza, but these chronic disorders that are lining our school districts, lining our preschools, food allergies, asthma, autism, ADD, ADHD, we have to do something, and we have to get the information out and hope and pray that people will wake up. The headlines concerning COVID-19 were laughable in light of the real crisis that we have. The percentages of people who were contracting COVID-19, contracting influenza, contracting measles is just so minuscule compared to, these alarming levels of, 1 in 16 boys in Ireland having autism.
Yeah, you brought that up perfectly. I had that set up for you next, because if we think about the predictions from where it was in history, recent history, in terms of autism manifestation among the young people, and particularly boys who seem to be more vulnerable, this headline is shocking and scary as it gets. 1 in 16 Irish boys has autism. And who's bringing that up as a crisis in terms of public health? That's not considered. I mean, how devastating that is to the future of Ireland, much less the rise in incidence here in the United States or Canada or any other of the Western nations that have adopted vaccination as sacrament in the church of pharmaceutical or biological mysticism. And where are we going? If it's 1 in 16, I mean, where was it before to where it's now 1 in 16?
Right. We're headed towards economic and social collapse by, either being somebody who is directly affected and directly diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, or being a caregiver. There will be nobody else left. There will be nobody else left. And people, even insiders kind of mocked and looked askance at Stephanie Seneff's predictions when she was looking at the exponential growth curve in terms of the autism epidemic. Hey, we're following that trajectory. We really are following that trajectory. And you look at 1 in 16 boys, and you look at, what is woefully inadequate in the United States, where they're saying 1 in 54 children, which we know is much, much greater than that. It's much greater incidence than that in our own school systems. So we're headed towards economic and social collapse because of this. And, when I see Children's Health Defense do a press release on my behalf that went out yesterday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, I expect my phone to be ringing off the hook, and I'm getting crickets from the mainstream media. Nobody really seems to care.
What does it mean? It means they do not want this information out there.
No.
As we point out, this is a more devastating, real impending and current danger, clear and present, as we call it, danger, than COVID-19, without question. That's been the case from the very beginning, even though the predictions were that it would be much worse. Of course, the predictions were wrong. The people who were making the predictions had been wrong for decades, in fact. Yet those who have within and outside of the scientific circles been pointing out, look at where autism is going. What does that mean for the future? Are actually pointing out something that will destroy, as you said, economies, but the ability of nations to even be nations. And perhaps that's an agenda for those who are globalists, who want to see the destruction of nations. And that could be done because when no one can go into the army, not that I'm a warmongering kind of guy, but certainly in defense of a nation, there's an appropriate place for the immune system of that nation to defend itself. And if we look back at this article about Ireland and the Irish boys, the autism crisis, again, dwarfs it, according to the Bill Gates Institute for Health Matrix. 81,766 deaths from COVID. I dispute those numbers, but hey, let's put that aside. The average age of death there was 75. In contrast, autism is attacking infants, presaging a lifetime of nightmarish agony. Brian Hooker knows that very well from his son being injured from vaccines into that spectrum. Half will never go on a date, write a poem, hit a baseball, join the military, pay taxes, cast a vote, run for office, speak, or use a toilet. Their cost of care is over $250 billion US annually, rising. And the big quote, pull-out quote here, children receiving the Hep B vaccine in the first 30 days had a 1,135% increased risk for an autism diagnosis. Now, you didn't get into that in your article. You just talked about asthma, ear infections, developmental delays. So this sounds even much scarier, what's happened in Ireland.
Correct. And what we did find, it's interesting because we were working with practitioners who were friendly to non-vaccinators. How these practitioners did give vaccines, and if they had children whose parents wanted them on the CDC schedule, they would deliver the CDC schedule. They would do that. These were not non-vaccinating pediatricians. They gave vaccines in their office. Each practitioner did. And but what we saw, because they were friendly, we saw a lower incidence of autism in these practices, to the point where we just didn't have enough autism to do valid statistics. We just didn't have enough. I'm working on follow-up studies right now where we're working with larger numbers of individuals and individuals with more diverse vaccination schedules, and we're starting to be able to run those statistics. But I found it almost an indictment that when we looked at these children who were definitely a microcosm that we could study, but more were unvaccinated than we would expect in a national average, we did see lower autism numbers. We saw lower autism spectrum disorder, and we saw lower ADD, ADHD.
Well, I've said it because my children are not vaccinated now, 20 and almost 15, not suffering from any of the chronic ailments and illnesses that both my wife and I suffered independently long before we met, as children who were fully vaccinated according to schedule, and my wife more closely resembled, even though she's a couple of years older than me, a millennial schedule, because she was a military family. And so she traveled around and got hit with these vaccines more than most in her generation and mine. And of course, the health challenges we both have faced in our lifetime are tremendous, even her more so, and she had more vaccines than I had. So we recognized that before we had children, and made a very conscious decision that no needle containing a vaccination was coming near our children. And because of that, having witnessed our own upbringing, seeing our children grow, there's no question that they're healthier than most in their generation. Now, as you say, 54% that's been reported of young people in America having chronic diseases, and that includes a subset of those with increasing rates of autism spectrum diagnoses.
That is correct, and we have to come to grips with that. As a parent of a 22-year-old autistic male who is the light of my life, I would do anything for him. He is a gentle soul. He's wonderful. He's very, very kind, completely nonverbal. Has to, use my wife and I to communicate to anybody else what his needs, wants, and desires are. And just a few select people beyond that, has to have his routine. This is debilitating. The normalization of autism is just a bunch of crap. You see shows like The Good Doctor, and you think, oh yeah, my son's going to go to medical school. I don't think so. We have to teach him how to write first as a 22-year-old. So, this is devastating, debilitating. The new normal, or the normalization of these diagnoses, couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, Brian, knowing what you've been through only from a distance, and seeing, having met your son as well over the years, and other families that have raised children who have been injured thusly, and seen the most severe of these diagnoses, this is not something you would wish on the worst of scenarios. I mean, to see your children never be able to, what was described, to not have what you normally consider, hey, you're a kid, right? You do things, right? You grow up to be an adult, you get to do things. None of that is possible in these severe diagnoses, right. Even if, we were to argue that the earlier the better, to reverse some of the injury due to everything that's been brought into these children, could help, and we've had physicians on over the years to do that. But there are cases where that wasn't available to most, and they're beyond that. And now we're witnessing these children grow into young adult status that never have the independence. And the fear, of course, as a parent, you included, is like, what happens when you're gone? I mean,
exactly.
And then we've seen devastating things happen because of that concern. And I think that sense of humanity, or the lack thereof, in those that are attacking us or you or others for daring to point out there may be a relationship between the vaccine schedule, individual or collectively, and these devastating diagnoses, from the mildest scenarios of things that maybe have been covered in your study to the most severe that wasn't assessed in the study in terms of autism.
Right.
And we know that those that mention vaccines and autism together do not get funded for studies and do not get published. It's almost like an automatic no. That's not happening. It was hard enough for you to get this study published.
Right. And we want to be able to spread the word. I relive my son's 15 months vaccinations in my mind daily. And, with a significant healthy dose of regret that we were talked into by a practitioner to get him vaccinated while having an active ear infection. And don't get me wrong, the other vaccines that my son had prior to his 15-month well baby checkup did contribute. He was a sick kid. He was a very, very sick kid, but there was a toxic tipping point, and that was his toxic tipping point. And so take it from somebody else. I have a difficult time not begging and pleading new parents to take a different course of action and really, really do their research with the resources that you have online, and don't just follow the dogma.
No, please. God bless you, Brian Hooker, my friend. I appreciate you so very much. And, your dedication to this and to help other children not go through the things that your child has undergone, and to communicate through the scientific literature as well to those that may have a bigger impact in some sense, certainly within their sphere of influence, to see these realities somewhat devoid of emotion, which is hard to do because you've lived this. But to see it numerically presented and presented in that is important for a number of folks on our planet. And I pray that they are open to see it, hear it, and act accordingly on it. And I will say, to me, this is a spiritual crisis, because ultimately, whatever you believe about vaccines, if you would deny people the freedom who believe differently than you to take a different course of action, whether it be no vaccines or just some and not all, that to me is the fundamental issue. Whether I believe in them or not is not for me to say you can or can't have them for you. This is fundamentally an issue of freedom, but I would also say scientific integrity. It shouldn't be an oxymoron. And in your case, it's not, because you brought it here today and every time we are together. We got to take a break. Our UK Health Radio folks got to drop, and I know that you've got a call coming up at the top of the hour, so I want to say thank you, Brian Hooker, for being on board today. I can't wait till the next time. It shall not be a year and a half.
No, it's not going to be a year and a half, and thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to present this, and God bless you for your work. Thank you. Links are in the show notes at robertscottbell.com. Thank you, Brian Hooker. Thank you, Super Don. We'll be right back with more bonus information after the fact. Stay with us.
The Robert Scott Bell Show. Robert Scott Bell Show.
Check out a sweet offer that my friends at Better Way Health give. This is an immune boosting supplement that you can't get anywhere else.
Beta-glucan activates and enhances your immune response to invaders.
These things are brilliant for modulating the immune system.
Someone has a need for help in supporting their immune system, I'm looking at the glucan part.
It's amazing, and there's been an enormous amount of research done on this.
It's the most studied immunomodulator on Earth, with over 14,000 published studies referencing beta-glucan, and it's currently being tested in roughly 100 clinical trials.
If you like your dietary supplements with validated science, there's nothing that has more behind it than the beta-1,3-D glucan from Better Way Health.
Probably the most heavily researched substances that I'm aware of that modulates the immune system.
It rebuilds your immune system.
Consistency and quality are everything.
Here, you want to see my supplement drawer? Here it is. Get ready.
I was putting together my research and I tripped on this supplement called beta-glucan.
There it is. It's very small. I take beta-glucans, immune booster.
You don't have to worry that you're overstimulating the immune system. We have been just amazed.
I take like 2 a day from Better Way Health.
It's been tested against about 36 other immune boosting products and found to be superior.
If you have an immune system or you want one, beta-1 3D glucan, that transfer point is very unique. It's going to get the results that you're looking for. I support it and I use it.
Better Way Health, I got to tell you, you can spend more time, you can spend more money, but you cannot get better service than you're going to get from those guys down there. They are truly 24 karat.
The brand you want to get is called Transfer Point Beta-1 3D Glucan, and you can get it from betterwayhealth.com. Let's spread the message about beta-glucans. It's a powerful substance from nature that can help you.
Here we go. Bonus time now on the Robert Scott Bell Show. Brian Hooker has got a lot of work to do, so he's got some calls to make. So we are you and me and Super D right now. Super Don impressions of the interview. We've had Brian on, obviously, many times over the years. He's a good friend.
Always good. Yeah.
This was a distinct next level with this publication and what it went through to get to publication and what it reveals. Again, validating what I've observed, as I said. But ultimately, will it change anything? Yes, I think, because more people are one by one coming back to sanity. Will it change everything overnight? No, none of these things tend to do it. But I think just like he talked about that toxicological tipping point in his son, right? That one shot at 15 months, it was building on all that preceded it. So when we talk about the transformation that becomes looking back 100th monkey scenario, it's because of everything that precedes it. And then that one thing looks like it tips it over the top, but everything in a cumulative good way transforms consciousness to the point where we go, oh my gosh, once again, were we duped on the vaccine issue?
Indeed. And a lot of people really enjoyed having him on. We don't get him on as much as we'd like to, but he's hard to nail down. He's so busy.
Yeah. Well, he's been knee deep in this for a long time to get it ready.
And he teaches too. He's a teacher. And so he's a busy guy, but always good to have him on.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Interesting story we didn't get to today. It's in the show notes. Let me see if I can find it here. Right, there it is. It's on Fierce Pharma. But if you go to robertscottbell.com and you scroll down in today's notes, you can say thanks to all of our wonderful supporters out there, and you can click on any banner, of course. COVID-19 vaccines, continuing a long history of medical experimentation on children. That's another children's health defense perspective. But this final story is interesting. And by the way, is it the last day or last 2 days of the vitamin masterclass with Andrew
Today's the
Saul?
last day.
Okay, so there's still an opportunity to, if you click on that link below the notes today, to sign up. Even if you've missed a bunch, they'll have a replay weekend on it, so you can get in on that for free. But drug makers struggle to meet demand for antidepressant Zoloft amid COVID-19. What do I say about living in anxiety, living in fight or flight?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not advocating that you take drugs like Zoloft, but the recognition that there's a huge spike in demand indicates that what I perceive to be the bad guys are successful in raising the level of angst and anxiousness and fear in the population, or else what other explanation is there for an increased demand for antidepressants in this time? Not rhetorical, but I mean, if you can think of something else, I don't know what it would be. What is going on?
Well, no, you've got the higher demand. The other thing they're saying here that's causing the shortage is that because I believe it's a generic. It's available as a generic.
Yes.
But they're having trouble getting a hold of the ingredients to make it.
Is it because China is on lockdown or what?
Well, listen, I mean, they warned us and everybody early on in this pandemic thing that there was going to be a shortage of drugs, or there was going to be an effect on there because 80% of the stuff that we are prescribing in this country comes from China. And with the pandemic and the shutdowns and the interruption into the distribution chain, that this was going to be something that would be happening. So could be that that's playing a part in it as well.
Well, it's significant. And what I would argue, if I could, and I can, that instead of reaching for Zoloft, might you consider CBD? Might you consider some plus CBD oil to reduce anxiety?
Or some kratom. Kratom would work too.
Right? And we have links still to them. If you go to robertscottbell.com, I know we some of you rely on us to help you get to the right stuff, the good stuff, things that I would utilize and things that we are utilizing right now. We were introduced to kratom from my friends John and Jackie back at the Healthy Buddha in Central Florida. They have availability. There's a phone number you can dial, 352-729-6609 from Kratom Corner. They mentioned the Robert Scott Bell Show, and you'll get a special discount. Also, if you're new to the show, our friend John Bush from My Brave Botanicals, he has offered a free ounce of kratom for any of our listeners that are new to him and what he's doing. I would argue, again, not meaning to be argumentative, but I would suggest that you take advantage of the multi-pack because it's like 50% off for your first trial to see which veins you like. If you're not sure about kratom, go to previous episodes of the Robert Scott Bell Show. As far as I know, Super Don, they have not been banned, even though to post about kratom will get you banned on social media.
On Facebook, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so those are options for you.
Yep.
Also, for the Plus CBD oil, that is pluscbdoil.com. Your first order, you can get it 30% off, RSB 30. I believe on an ongoing basis, you can still use RSB 15, if I'm not mistaken, but let me know if that has changed or has changed. Also, our friends at Synergy Science offer a special discount, the key technologies. Click on that. It'll automatically be entered. If not, remember the code. I believe it's RSB 15. I apologize. We can't remember all of these things. Choose to be Healthy as RSB 5. You can support us on Patreon. We're working on doing a brief Zoom meeting soon. We have our next Ask Me Anything scheduled for our Patreon supporters. And we're still waiting for some of you to let us know your T-shirt sizes because we have the Robert Scott Bell Show shirts courtesy of the design of Steve Feld, which really look good. I don't know. Some of you have gotten them. I would love to see any of you wearing them. Take a picture out in the world with you wearing a Robert Scott Bell Show T-shirt to show the world where you're at in terms of health, freedom, and healing liberty. That would be fun. If you're so amenable to it, we can post it as a thank you as well. So that's another thing to do.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be cool. All right. So coming up tomorrow on the Robert Scott Bell Show, we have got in hour one, Mary Toko will be joining us in hour one. What's Mary going to be talking about?
Oh, hold on a second. I got to reach down here.
Going to reach down there. What's down there?
She sent me some stuff.
Oh, okay.
So there's a DVD here. What you don't know can hurt you related to vaccines, risks. Here, let me see that. Risks, responsibility, and rights. Mary has got a good piece on that. Also, small booklet, Holistic Heritage Series, Natural Immune Development, A Deeper Understanding of Our Immune System by Mary Toko. So these are the things that we'll make available tomorrow. And let's see, I've got a couple of other small little booklets here. Vaccines, untested vaccine additives. So this is good educational material that Mary will bring out. So we got that coming up tomorrow as well. And
as well as Ty Bollinger.
Yeah, Ty Bollinger also going outside the box. Also, this Friday, scheduled to be 9 Eastern, 4 o'clock. No, I'm sorry. I'm doing the math here. 6 o'clock Pacific. Yes. That would be 7 o'clock Mountain and 8 o'clock Central. Friday evening is supposedly a presentation by me on vaccine injury recovery, 5G, a lot of questions and answers. Supposed to be held at a local governmental building. We'll tell you about it as soon as I get confirmation. We're dealing with the local bureaucrats, so to speak, or what we say representatives about social distancing or not. Will they give us the access to the place where we usually do these lectures? I did this in January of 2020, and I talked about the Real ID. So they've invited me back to talk about some other health issues. And typically, Your Health Freedom is a group on Facebook, and they also have a YouTube channel So there may likely be a simulcast, and we might be doing it in somebody's backyard if we can't get this governmental building to open up and allow us to do it. So that is the only thing that I'm hesitant about revealing it yet. Just wanted to let you know, heads up, if you don't have plans for Friday evening and you want to watch the stream live from around the world, or if you want to attend in person, I'll get you that information as soon as we have it confirmed. We're waiting on that right now.
All right. Well, that's all I got.
That's it?
That's it.
That's not a lot. You got to have more than that.
No,
I did this whole show, actually, courtesy of you. D-E... So how do you pronounce S-A-C-C-O-N-E? Saccone? I apologize. Probably Italian. Robert and Don feel like talking about Trump's illegal deployment of our troops on our soil and his psychotic authoritarian comments. He has crossed the line for many who have supported him. Well, listen, I'm going to acknowledge that there, as we've said from the beginning, Super D, there are things that we love about Trump. There are things that we're kind of meh about, and there are things that we go, no, that doesn't fall in line with anything that I know of in the Constitution. Prior to Trump becoming president, of course, pretty much everything the federal government has been doing is unconstitutional. I'm just going to say it. So why would we expect different of a president that comes in who happens to not be a globalist in the likes of the Democrats and Republicans preceding him? So to acknowledge certain things that we don't like in terms of use of the military or threatens the use of the military domestically, you have to achieve a high bar of proof or evidence to throw down what we call insurrection. I would argue, and Super Don, you might have an opinion on this too, that the riots typically are to be addressed on a state level and a local level police force issue, not a military issue, right? We don't want to even see the militarization of the police force. There's been a lot of that has happened well prior to Trump being here. But are we of the mind that there are existential threats to the continuity of the United States of America right now with everything that's going on? This is not me making excuses. I'm seriously asking the question. And what is going to happen in the next phase of this if this continues on? This movement toward collectivism, socialism, and even communism, and the destruction of the defense of individual liberty and whatever constitutionally limited government that our founders left us with, if we could keep it, right? So I think we're dealing with some very, very serious issues that cause us to ask questions about the future of the country. And I don't think Trump is the focal point, in my opinion, or any president. He's just one of the so-called, he's there at this point in time in history for specific reasons, and I will still say I am glad he is there and not Hillary Clinton. I'm very clear on that.
Yeah. I mean, whatever, I guess. You know, look, my feelings about Trump, I've been pretty clear from the beginning of this. I didn't think he was going to win. When he did win and he was put in there, look, I mean, we could even go back to, what was it? It was it 2012 when he was running around bad-mouthing Ron Paul?
Yeah, remember that.
And was it 2012? I think it was 2012 when he was doing the whole, I'm going to have a presidential debate of my own type thing, and people had to go like to his office and kiss his ring, to be in his good favor to be able to be in the debate or stuff. I'm pretty sure that's when it was.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but maybe it was 2016. I can't remember. Anyway.
Yeah.
I have never been a big fan of Trump. I just never have. And so, when he got elected, it wasn't like I was like, yay, Trump's my man. It was more like, holy crap, Donald Trump won. This is going to be like amazing, right? That he had become president.
It's been entertaining.
Now, with that said, the entertainment value has been through the roof. He's done some good. Look, you can't deny the fact that some good things have come about.
Dude, pulling out of the WHO is amazing.
He's done some crazy stuff, crazy good stuff. I mean, up until this crazy stuff happened here with the coronavirus. I mean, the economy was doing great. A lot of spending going on. Okay, and that's a problem, regardless of what any president that we've had. We've never had a president that has fixed that problem. He's exposed the media in a way that I don't think anybody ever could have. And there's a list of things that are good that have happened. Now, as far as the military thing goes, this is something I think we ought to bring up with Emord when we get him on Thursday.
Sure.
Because the Insurrection Act has been around since like 1807 or something like that. You know, it was a law that was enacted by the Congress back then, and the purpose of it is when there's like an exceptionally urgent situation with civil disorder, right?
Well, you talk about an attempted overthrow.
It's like the Insurrection Act it's a federal law. It's been around for a really long time. It hasn't been used, as far as I understand, in a really long time. But it's there. It was a law that was enacted by Congress. So would he be within his rights to do that if it got to that point? Because I mean, think about it. You know, you look at what's going on with these rights. Now, I personally think it's going to just die down and go away. You know, I mean, that's just me. That's Super Don. Always thinks everything's going to end up being okay. In the event that it didn't, and this really got out of hand, you saw what happened over at the White House, right? You got Secret Service agents that were getting injured. I think there was like 50 of them that got injured with what was going on there. Trump was in the underground bunker 5 stories below the White House. You know, so it sounds on face value like it's getting kind of nuts and crazy, and that it could move in a direction, but I don't think it will. But if it did, let's just say it did. Let's say there was massive civil unrest and it was out of control beyond what the National Guard can handle, right? Would Trump be within his rights to take advantage of the Insurrection Act to try and clamp down on it?
Put it down, right?
Legally, yeah. Legally, he would be able to do that.
Let me back out to that global, close to a global perspective, not as a globalist. And I'm talking universal, I'm talking spiritual. That my belief is that this place called planet Earth is kind of a testing ground for all of us. Souls that come here, and there's a long waiting list, I believe. Because the opportunity for spiritual growth is almost unlimited. And so because of that, there is always discord. There is always opposition. We're in the worlds of duality. There is always war. And our consciousness will dictate perhaps how we perceive this, as well as if we want to contribute to that, which is negative and fearful and all of that, or if we want to try and create the proverbial better world. I'm not of the belief that there's a utopian place on the planet, right? As we talk about, where would you go? Because if we lose liberty here, where would you go? Is there another country that at its origin point embraced individual liberty? I don't believe that there is. So at a certain point, we may say, you know what? I'm going to stand my ground here. I'll find a higher ground to say, this is where if we have to do battle, not that we want to, but the recognition is there are entities that would like to destroy America and that which it stood for originally, the good stuff, right? And so there's always that ongoing push-pull, and our founders warned us that it wasn't going to be a cakewalk. You can't just rest on it and think that Constitution will defend itself. So we've already outlasted what Jefferson said, was it every 20 years? I forget what he said, the tree of liberty has to be watered with the blood of tyrants. We're talking bloody revolutions over time, or defense of liberty. And we've kind of had it easy for a long time. But we've also drifted away from origin point. Constitutional limitations on our government. We drifted away from defense of individual liberty. We've embraced collectivism, socialism, and communism in our own country. In the history of the progressive era from the 19th century to today, or even from the moment the Constitution was ratified and we declared, this new nation, that there have been attempts to destroy it, to infiltrate it, and change it from within. So there's nothing new under the sun related to that. What is new, perhaps, in recorded history, that the United States of America was and is the first country that genuinely invested sovereignty with the people, not a king, queen, emperor, etc., or the government itself. And we have drifted so far from it that I think there's a natural, if I can call it progression, but there's a natural uprising for the people who love liberty and recognize that, man, we have gone so far off course. And there are those we describe as the sheeple, the collectivists, who just want to be taken care of, who want powerful centralized bureaucracy because they're not over, their mommy and daddy. They're not living at home, or maybe they are. They want more of that. And so there is this there's always tension, and it seems to be rising up. Now, some would say artificially, but we participated in our own demise over now generations of abandoning limited government to embrace centralized bureaucracies, unlimited spending, fiat money, printing money out of thin air through Federal Reserve System, etc., and just artificial growth not based on principle. And so there is a karmic, what we call payback or payment due. Individually, and a nation, if you will, has its own karmic debt to pay. And so I think the struggles we're seeing are part of a long list of what do they call usurpations and all of these things. And we're now in that time of a quickening where we can now personify that in Trump. Love him or hate him, right? People will invest all of their hate energy or all of their love energy. And I've said this many times, and you've heard me, Super Don, there are no political saviors. Yes, I am glad Trump is there, not Hillary Clinton. And I think there's good reason for that. But ultimately, it would be wonderful to not care who was president because the central government had little or nothing to do with most of our lives as it was designed to be by our founders. The fact that we care so much who is our president tells us how far we've gone wrong in America to embrace this centralization of power in violation of the concerns of the founders when they ratified the Constitution to begin with, to say, hey, the risk here is that we become this one glob of a nation as opposed to recognizing not 50 states at that time, but right now 50 states of independent autonomy and sovereignty that were superior to the federal government, that they outsourced certain things to the federal government and that which wasn't reserved to the states and the people. Now we come back to 10th Amendment issues. Are we far beyond that? Now, treaties have superseded Constitution, been made in violation of constitutional limitations, and Trump found a way. He found a loophole to apparently pull us out of the WHO. This is great. I call that a good trend. So overall, I'd say net positive, net negative in terms of a president like Trump. I'm going net positive. That will upset some of you who brought up that you don't like Trump. Fine. But I'm weighing it out, and I'm going, it's way better than what it would have been. Is it ideal? No. Will it ever? I don't know. I don't think that this planet is designed to have the utopian, ideal where liberty is always respected and governments don't make war on people and people don't make war on people,
Yeah, and that's why, every 4 years we have the little circus and sideshow and everything like that with the election and the campaigns and all
they
that
distract
stuff.
us from our spiritual center,
which
too.
I'm telling you, I do not miss. I have not missed this year.
It's been great
weird.
not having that.
It's strange to think about the fact that there's an election coming up in November because it sure doesn't feel like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, I think it's important that people, at least in my opinion, should be focusing more on what's going on in locally in your community than being so focused about what's happening in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Because
well, it'd be nice
ultimately,
not to.
Ultimately, that's what matters.
The thing is,
that's really where you have the most impact, the most effect.
Sure. And if we had not invested in centralized bureaucracy and power or looked the other way as it continued to strengthen, as I said, it would be much less of a concern who's president, honestly. Barbara has a comment here. Trump has done some good things, but sometimes he reminds me of an oversized 2-year-old. All right. Look, Trump's got an interesting personality, outsized, oversized, maybe inflated sense of self, ego, whatever. But at the same time, having one step removed, someone who's near and dear to me, we've talked about and who worked with him for 10 years, there's a lot of good in him. It's not a clear dark side, light side scenario. We all have that. We all have our interpretations. He is here at this point in time, I believe, for a very specific purpose. And I tend to believe ultimately for the betterment, not the worsening. And I know some people will argue with that. That's fine. We can disagree on that. But once again, ultimately, I'd like to see the reduction of size and scope and power of the centralized federal government down to its constitutional limitations. Will that happen? I think inevitably it would, based on economic circumstances, when everybody says, you know what, we're not accepting the petrodollar. Then what? Then it becomes a whole different thing. No matter what you believe or think or want, how do you pay for it? We paid for it on the backs of the future generations by pawning off the debt forever and ever. You can't even question it. And then, of course, tying the dollar to petrochemicals or oil because it's not backed by gold. It isn't one-to-one scenario. So we have a lot of things that have happened, and it's taken the course of many generations to get here. And whether if you believe you've lived before or not, or you're here just for this specific purpose, I would just ask you kindly, politely, to look deeper than the left-right Hegelian dialectic, even though we have to acknowledge it from time to time. And get your guidance, get your talking points and your memos from spirit, from deep within, your connection to your divine origin point. And that is what I'll say about that. So that was interesting how that came about today as a wrap-up.
Yeah.
Good eliciting of commentary. Hopefully that's helpful to you all. Or if you want to diverge from my viewpoint, that's fine.
Or if it sucked, then just
let me know.
Okay.
Oh, that totally sucked, Robert.
That just
Super
blew,
Don,
man.
shut him up, Super Don. He should not be allowed to speak about these things. But I appreciate y'all bringing it up. Yeah. Let's see. RSB and Super Don have moved on from Dr. Shiva. We had an interview with him. What more do you want?
Juniper is asking us to revisit Dr. Shiva. I don't think there's enough room on our show for his ego, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Look, it's not just the beef that he has with Dr. Batard, Juniper. He's got a beef with anybody who disagrees with him, and then he talks crap about him and threatens to sue them. And
not pleasant. It doesn't allow for an opening for continued dialogue and communication.
No,
kind of shut it down.
It's all about look at me, how great I am. I'm awesome. Have I mentioned I invented email? My family was poor. Everybody else's family was rich. Everybody else is racist if they say anything bad about me. I can't stand people like that.
Right. By the way, D.E. Saccone. Can you spell out how you pronounce your last name? He says, "Word, Robert, that was awesome." Well, thank you. I appreciate, again, bringing these things up. I don't want to foment more anger and angst. That's not my intention of covering any of these issues, even though I'm human. I get upset with my friends on the political left right now. Yeah, I'm upset with people on the political right about certain things, but right now the biggest threat I see to our freedom is their devotion to the religion of medicine and science and scientism. And so that's why, the ire, my focus goes there more often than not because I hate liberals, man. It's not about that. It's about them using certain things to take away my freedom. That's where I draw the line.
Keeping it real.
Yeah.
It's obvious we identify more with a conservative libertarian point of view.
Yeah.
So, if we're talking issues and ideologies,
we would acknowledge
we're
that,
automatically not going to lean towards a left, liberal point of view.
But classical liberalism, which is more conservative and libertarian in reality, but
it's flip-flopped over the years. It's a very interesting to look at that way.
Yeah.
But listen, we agree with people. I mean, who was it? I'm trying to remember who it was.
Saccone.
Was it Kucinich?
Okay. Yeah, Dennis Kucinich, right? Yes. He and Ron Paul got together on certain issues.
They got together really well.
Diametrically opposed on others. And we try to find those points of alignment. By the way, it's Saccone. Thank you. D.E. Saccone. I appreciate that. I hadn't encountered that. It does sound Italian, I'm guessing. But thank you, RSB. And Super Pirate Don. Are you Pirate Don today?
Do pirates wear reading glasses? I don't know.
Yeah. Brookalinos, thanks for lifting up the perspective above the minutia. Well, we dive into the minutia, but I always like to get that, if I can, close enough to a 360-degree viewpoint that's possible so that we are not victims of the dialectic, the division. Recognizing that it exists, acknowledging differences, yes, but not playing into the convenience of anger and politics and divide, trying to see deeper so that we can recognize our divinity and our connection, right? Not in just some kind of new agey kind of you can't have feelings sort of way, but I think in a way more grounded to, I think ultimately our true home and true reality and true origin point. That's it. So Pirates wear an eye patch and he's not wearing an eye patch. That's true. So with that, hey, we've gone, almost 3 hours today. 2.5
half
today.
an hour into,
But again, these questions and comments can elicit this kind of discussion that we don't always go to. So I do appreciate you, all of you, for doing that. If you're interested, I'm not interested in going there just for my sake. It's not from vanity or ego's sake. I really feel good about being able to communicate this. And if you guys have perspectives that differ, I'm okay with that too. That's cool. You can believe what you want about this and that. That's great. If we can have this, open dialogue and discussion. For me, Sicilian, not Italian. Only Sicilians would say grazie.
Oh, Sicilian.
Okay.
Huh?
Thank you for the distinction, because I hardly make distinction between certain areas of Great Britain and United Kingdom and England. I screw up on that all the time.
Italy, Italy's got some. See, my ancestry comes from northern Italy, and it's definitely different. Trying to remember where it was. Lucca, I think it is, in Italy.
My name is Luca.
That's right.
I live on the. When we went to one of my trips I used to backpack through Europe every summer as a youngster, teens to my 20s. And there was a place we went to. Where's that sinking city called in Italy again? What is it called? Come on, Super Don.
Venice?
Venice, thank you. So we went to Venice, took the train into Venice, and of course, we weren't staying there. It was like a 12 or 18-hour daytime visit. And so we're like, where do we put our luggage, tracking whatever we had? And we found a little hostel or hotel, and it was on the second floor, and the guy's name was Luca. And it was at the time where that song came out, Luca on the second floor. I'm like, how weird is this? Did they know?
That was
Did she
a
know?
pretty annoying song. Actually.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah.
I think it was about abuse or something. But anyway, he was nice. He didn't steal anything from our luggage. I remember that was a good trip to Venice that day. We did that. So Melissa, hi Melissa. And so Venice was good. I did not have a good trip to Rome. Rome did not like me. There are reasons for that apparently. But Northern Italy I loved. I enjoyed that. Again, going there. And hopefully one day we can travel again.
It's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
It is.
So
sure.
I don't know what else I want. Oh, you know what I wanted to say as we wrap up here? Thanks to John Hewlett with the Cardio Miracle.
Cardio Miracle.
Yep. I decided, I talk with John off the air because, I don't have a lot of complaints health-wise. You know me. I'm pretty hardcore, organic. I like to exercise, but I stepped it up in the last couple of weeks to get back into my boxing routine, not just in my home boxing heavy bag and speed bag, and tried out a couple of boxing gyms. And now I'm in a week-long trial with one that is it's a 30-minute circuit, and I've done it twice each time I go. So I like to work out for an hour. So I'm really pushing my body again. So I've decided to try a scoop of that Cardio Miracle for nitric oxide enhancement in the morning, every morning. So far, so good, man.
Cool.
I've been clipping along. The people at this gym are like, "This is your first time here?" Yeah, it's my first time here. And then yesterday, "This is your second time here?" Yeah, it's your second. I'm going through it twice. Most people go through it once. I'm like, once is not enough. So I don't know what to attribute, but I will say nitric oxide production is a good thing for vascular health, and I'm going for it. And Super Don, there's a way.
And you'll know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where and this is what happened with me when I was taking it. Was it's like I took it and I was like, hey, I feel great, and I'm like, listen, I'm smart enough and honest enough to look at the situation and go, I got to do it more than just a couple times to know whether this is just a placebo thing or something like that.
Sure.
So I did it for over a month. And this stuff works, man.
Yeah.
It does. It genuinely works. And so I'm excited to hear about what kind of progress you're going to
So there's a banner here, bless your heart. Just click on the banner and you get 15% off. I think the code is just RSB, or it might be automatic, but
it's actually automatic.
Okay, so when you click
you
over,
automatically get the discount by using that banner.
So I've got this, I think I've got the 60 count serving.
60 servings? Yeah, it comes in a 60 and a 90, I think.
And it's the powder, so I'm taking a scoop of it. I know they have little individual serving size packets.
The ingredients are good. It's sweetened with, I think it's erythritol and stevia.
Yeah. So it actually tastes good. No problem there.
It tastes good. It mixes great in water, which has been one of my big beefs for the longest time with supplements.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it when you mix something and then you go to drink it and it's all in the bottom of the glass.
Right.
That's just annoying, or floating or something. It's just
it mixes in well.
So mixes really good. Yeah.
It's good. So I just want to give that update. I'll show you my muscles later when Ty's on, so that they don't look so big. I don't want anybody scared and intimidated. So with that, I think.
All right, let's get out of here.
I think we've overstayed our welcome.
B-Wise is asking, how many servings do I do a day? I do at least 3.
Mm-hmm.
The recommendation is once in the morning, once at night.
Yeah.
But I'm doing 3 a day, sometimes 4.
Right.
And,
well, you are a classic person that would say, this I need, right? Based on everything we've talked about in terms of lifestyle and risk factors and such. So you'll get an immediate benefit. As I talk with John Hewlett, I was like, honestly, John, I don't know that I need this, right? I'm like, but then I'm challenging myself, and there's history of vascular issues, and I could point them out in my own. So it's not a major thing.
And I've got that in my family too.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a test. So I'm doing a scoop in the morning. That's it. That's just my thing. I do so many things supplemental wise, whole food, nutrients, things like that. So I'm giving it a go. I never focused on the nitric oxide. So we'll let you know as things. G. Edward Griffin loves Cardio Miracle. Well, anything to keep G. Edward going, and he's going in his 80s. We love him. I think he's almost
it's good
90.
stuff. It's one of the more impressive things that I've ever tried.
Yeah.
that has, and like I said, I did it long enough that I know that it's working for real. It's not just something that's in my head. Yeah.
So I will warn you before I show you my big bulging muscles. Just just give you a heads up. Maybe tomorrow at Ty, just to impress you. No, it won't be impressive when you see Ties. So that would be good. That would be keep my head level in that sense. Hey, love you guys. Thanks for hanging with us. A little extra time today, but good props for direction and discussion that I think was very worthwhile. In addition to thank you to Brian Hooker, please share the links in the show notes. And, of course, share the show if you can host watch parties while we are still able to use the media outlets. And then we'll continue to develop alternative means of outreach should the suppression of freedom of speech continue, or should Trump be successful in putting the fear of you-know-what into social media that they actually go, okay, we'll be the pass-through again. We're not going to do this stupid stuff of censorship. We'll see where it goes. And hi, Ula. Love to you and the family. Thank you for all that you do. Get a picture of you in your V-neck. I hope it fit. And anybody that's gotten the T-shirt so far in our Patreon crew, and if you haven't yet, we're just waiting on your size. So, and I don't have 2XLs. I apologize. The first run, we only went up to XL, from XS to XL, and everything in between. So let me know what you need, or let Super Don know so I can get those out to you as well. So
I'll shoot a message out to everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. We all did get down and we got funky.
Got the funky.
Yeah.
Yes.
So back tomorrow with more powerful healing. Then, well, you fill in the blanks from there. Power to heal is yours.